Again, welcome. I dressed up for kind of sporty coastal look today. uh, again, welcome task force members. Welcome to everybody that's come. I really appreciate the show out. This is the first time that we've done a technology task force meeting external to the Austin area, which I think partly emphasizes how important the ports are to what we do in the state, what we do in transportation and logistics in the state, and the value I find in the need to understand how ports are changing and how that might impact our overall transportation and logistics system, and how we might, from a TxDOT point of view, from an inland port, and from our transportation partners' point of view, better facilitate both movement in and out of the ports is our side of the operation. Um, we have Gare with us today, who's our lead for Maritime Division, and really appreciate you pulling together a lot of the folks today that we're having speak. So it's a big deal to us, and so excited to get to spend the morning with you. A few key updates since our last meeting: federal policy and program updates. There's been a number of Texas applications for several grants. There's several grants under the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, IIJA, and Texas members continue to submit proposals to those, and in most cases, we have some winning element across the state, and expect that to continue. There's an accelerating or not virtual, V2X, vehicle to everything communications. There's a grant out there for that. I think it may have just closed for applications. And then there's several that have been awarded ATTAIN grants, rural autonomous vehicle grants. And so congratulations to those that have been involved. And we have in our government affairs division, we're tracking all of those and actually are facilitating letters of support and other activities when needed as a part of those. Not every grant allows for that, but some do. And so we try to facilitate those. TxDOT is going to host the Transportation Review Board's mid-year conference on the subcommittee on artificial intelligence. We have a fantastic facility. Former Executive Director James Bass was heavily involved in that. And we've hosted several meetings for national level entities since that was opened up over a year ago now. And it's nice that we're able to draw in, as we're in the generally the middle of the U.S., opportunities to have those kind of meetings and be at the forefront of national discussion, not just within the state. Steve Dellenbeck, one of our task force members, has joined the USDOT Transforming Transportation Advisory Committee. Was that an appointment or yeah? That's a recently formed advisory committee. So congratulations, Steve. And that's all about emerging technologies, right? I mean, so it's everything from AI to autonomy. I think electrification was discussed in the first meeting as well. So it's great that we have a representative from our state that can speak to our challenges and bring our viewpoints as a part of that. So to the agenda, looking forward to all the discussions today. Very appreciative of the people that volunteered to come in and update. If you haven't been involved in the task force before, this brings the opportunity to TxDOT and then through us to our transportation partners across the state, the chance to hear from industry, to hear from other experts about emerging technologies and advancements as it relates to transportation. In many cases, 5+ years out. I always point out that back in 2013, in the early meetings, we were discussing autonomous vehicles and drones and those kind of things. And well, now they're here. And now, through the efforts of the task force and through pointing out that we needed to start beginning to look at these things, it led to programs within our department and others to address, where appropriate, what we need to do within our mission, but also to facilitate and ideally drive safely deployments of these types of technologies. So as we continue to have these discussions, I feel that these do turn into programs or to activities or to standards in some cases within our department and within others. So know that what you bring to us may not be implemented right away, but it certainly is well thought of and leads to a lot of advancement. We'll start with the supply chain ecosystem, which is quickly evolving and innovating via digitization, electrification, and automation. And it's responding to, the consistent growth of this state and the demands of the logistics chain throughout the U.S., originating from both our seaports or our Gulf ports and our land ports, and through our inland ports in many cases. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that discussion. We'll also hear from Gare, as I mentioned, of the Maritime Division, joined by other seaports in the state, who will address the scope and role of TxDOT within the supply chain environment. That's important to me on a side note because I'm also responsible for the commission, the Transportation Commission's Economic Development and Stakeholder Engagement Task Force. Pretty lengthy name, but it's focused on economic development. So bringing topics like this to that helps focus what the commission wants to talk about. And at the same time, I'm participating on an advisory committee for the governor's economic development element, and they're developing their latest strategic plan, and we get to contribute to that and what the state agencies are going to do as a part of that. We'll also talk about federal policy and funding initiatives, and that they're driving a number of technology. I mentioned the grants as an example, technology and infrastructure investments in the state. We'll hear about those federal initiatives and working to streamline data exchange across states and local agencies as it relates to transportation. Then later, port and supply chain leaders will discuss major opportunities and hurdles for Texas to support the continued growth of freight and movement inside and outside of the ports and through the state. With that, I'd like to also introduce the Center for Transportation Research team. We have Christy Chen, Andrea Gold, Mark Werner, and I know there's a number of other students somewhere out there in the audience, but appreciate what they do for us. I also have a strategic planning, we changed the name. Strategic Initiatives and Innovations Division, and several representatives I see are sitting over here today, so I appreciate all y'all being here as well. And really between the two of them, they make this effort work, and they make a number of other emerging technology activities in the department work. That's why it's Initiatives and Innovation. So thanks for being here, and thanks for getting this started for us. With that, I'll turn it over to Andrea.
Morning, everybody. Just a few logistics before we get into it. We've already given you a little background on the task force, gone through the agenda. We've got a number of folks who will be speaking on panels sitting at this table up here. We want to keep it somewhat of a roundtable format. So as you all have guidance or questions after the panelists speak, please chime in. And that goes for the audience in the back. And then we've got a number of people online. So we're going to do our best to field questions as they come in, keep notes, and take any recommendations that you all provide. Before we get started, I just want to recognize the task force members that are here. We've got two co-chairs, Darren, who y'all just met, and then we've got Amit Basin. If we could go around the table just real quick for an intro, just task force members only, and then we're going to ask Gare to come up and get into the programming. Dr. Basin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amit Basin from Center for Transportation Research at University of Texas at Austin.
James.
James Bass with the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority.
Shelley Rowe with Bluefield Leaders.
Colin Beck, Southwest Research Institute.
Kirk Steidel with the Steidel Executive Group. Michael Morris, North Central Texas Council of Governments, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Dallas-Fort Worth.
I'm Christy Chen with UT Center for Transportation Research. And I also wanted to acknowledge we've got Hillary Kane and Avery Ash online.
Phyllis Santoff, Port Freeport.
And before she brings up Gare, I made one error. I believe there was supposed to be a representative here. I don't believe that they are here. If they are, please let us know. And we also have from Senator Hinojosa's office, I believe, a couple of staff, Silvia Ramirez and Cindy Gonzalez. Is that right? So welcome. Did I miss any dignitaries? Because I certainly want to recognize you if you showed up for our meeting. Okay. Thanks for being here, y'all.
If We could go ahead and get the folks from the first panel to come up, and then we're going to have Dare come up from the Maritime Division at TxDOT to provide some context before we get started on some activities within the department and around the state.
Okay, good morning. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the TxDOT Maritime Division. Basically, we've been rather successful for a number of years of flying under the radar and having most people ask the question, what, TxDOT has a maritime division? But then all of a sudden, the legislature in their infinite wisdom decided to fund some of our programs, and now we're amongst the most popular kids at the dance. So I'll sort of give you a highlight of what we do and what our mission and vision is. So our MRD goals are basically, we want to support the development of high value growth in Texas's maritime environment. We also have been tasked with to assure the economic competitiveness of Texas ports. And the way that we do that is to collaborate with port and waterway operators, freight community and policymakers, and local leaders to identify opportunities and determine system-wide solutions for the challenges that are faced. We also communicate the capital needs of the ports in the Texas port system and highlight the economic impact of Texas ports to highlight also the waterborne or promote the waterborne transportation within Texas. We work together with a PAC, the Port Authority Advisory Committee. Phyllis is a member of our PAC, and thank you for your service. And the PAC is made up of representatives of the CEOs and directors of Texas ports. We have 3 from the Upper Coast, 3 from the Lower Coast. We have a permanent member from the Port of Houston, and we also have a member from the Lieutenant Governor's office and the Speaker of the House as well. And they, the PAC, help advise the Texas Transportation Commission and TxDOT on the issues facing the ports overall. And then collaboratively, we work to develop the port mission plan, which basically outlines the needs and the impacts of the ports in the state of Texas. And those impacts are pretty impressive. Texas is a vital part of the global supply chain, as well as the national freight network. And we're amongst the busiest ports in the nation. We handled over 625 million tons in 2020, and that's 25% of the nation's total. So a quarter of everything that moves through water for the United States of America moves through Texas ports. We also have 5 Texas ports that are ranked in the top 20. Houston, Corpus Christi, Beaumont, Freeport, and Port Arthur. And since I'm here in Corpus Christi, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight the fact that Corpus Christi is the #1 energy producing port in the United States of America as well, and a huge contributor to our state economy. About $450 billion of economic activity in Texas based on the Texas ports. It also supports about $1.3 trillion of activity in the nation and creates nearly 1.8 million jobs. And those 1.8 million jobs bring in about $287 billion, pardon me, in total income. And one key thing for everybody in the industry that knows, but most other folks don't, 90% of all consumer goods at one point or time or another travel over water. So the impact that the ports have on the waterways and the GIW just cannot be understated. And right now, we're looking at maritime trade volumes in the state of Texas to triple by 2050. And that comes from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So these are going to be significant numbers of increased tonnage and liquid bulks as well coming through the state in and out. So each biennium, the PAC, in collaboration with MRD, develops the mission plan. And this is really the go-to book of the needs of the ports in the state of Texas. We have the Seaport Connectivity Plan, which was one component that assesses current and state of landside connections, so first mile, last mile in and out of the ports. And it focuses on roadway connections. And historically, this has been really where TxDOT and the Maritime Division have been most active. And it's tied to the Seaport Connectivity Program funding mechanism that the 88th legislature continued to fund at a rate of $40 million, $20 million per year in the biennium. The second component is the Maritime Infrastructure Plan, and this one really highlights port capital projects. And it's also tied to the Maritime Infrastructure Funding Mechanism from the 88th Legislative, and it's actually historic. It's the first time in the state of Texas's history that state funds have been allocated to support the Texas ports. And the port infrastructure projects will work together with the port connectivity as well. The final program that we have, or the third one, is the Ship Channel Revolving Fund. And this identifies improvements to the ship channels. I don't think that there's a major port that hasn't either been focused on or is working on a ship channel. I mean, here in Corpus, obviously Houston, Sabine, and down in Bronzeville as well. So these are very, very important. This is in essence the I-10s, the I-45s, the I-35s of the water side of transportation for commodities. And this focuses on ship channel dredging. So basically, in the recent session, our funding grew from $40 million to $640 million from the state legislature into ports. Now, I'll kind of touch on each of them. So this is some photographs of some of the projects on the Seaport Connectivity Program. And since 2015, the legislature has approved has approved $180 million for these. And we, as TxDOT, have approved grants for 66 projects under this funding structure. And the 88th session, another $40 million was made available for the 24-25 biennium. 19 projects were funded and 14 projects at 8 Texas ports. And this is the Maritime Infrastructure Program. So this is the first time funding has been available to make investments inside the gates of ports. So this can be used for berths, warehouses, equipment, technology, just across the board, whatever the port sees as a need in order to continue to be competitively in the space that they need to be. These projects are eligible for this funding. And as I said, the legislature had never funded any kind of port infrastructure projects prior to this 88th session, and they put aside $200 million for this. Now, the focus of these projects is to be evaluated based on their economic need, their operational impact, connectivity needs, obviously, and then safety and security. Because one of the things that we have noticed is that ports are definitely being targeted more, especially in the cyber area, and also as physical assets. And for this, 12 projects were funded, and we managed to get 12 ports funded in this too. So this covers basically from Port of Orange to the Port of Brownsville along the entire state of Texas coast. And one of the things that we promised was that we were going to commit to have letting done by the end of fiscal year 2024. And I think that that's a very ambitious goal, and we feel very, very confident that we're going to be able to rise to the occasion, thanks to all the good work from all the ports that are promised us that they were going to spend the money when they got it. Okay, so let's see here. Ship channel, basically, this is the increase in the size of vessels creates a need to modernize the ship channels. So the Ship Channel Improvement Report evaluates all these projects and sees what investments would make Texas ports more competitive. And in 2017, the legislature passed Bill 28, creating the Ship Channel Improvement Revolving Fund, or the SCIRF, but it took until the 88th session to actually get it monetized. So now we have $400 million in that account as well. And these funds are to aid the financing of local shares and federally authorized ship channel projects. The low-term interest and longer payback periods and more flexible loans were put in place to help facilitate these moves and to jumpstart some of the federal programs. The Army Corps sometimes doesn't have the same ambitious intent as say the ports do to get some of their projects done. So this was designed as a tool to help facilitate that. And I want to touch just briefly on the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway in Texas. This is a key component of the Maritime Division's roles. We are the non-federal sponsor of the GIWW, which is basically the backbone of the interstate transportation along the coast of Texas. And we work with the Texas Transportation Commission as the state's designee to fulfill the responsibilities, which include working with the Army Corps of Engineers to acquire sites for dredge material disposal, identify opportunities to participate in BU projects, which are beneficial use. the Corps has recently come out with a desire to increase the amount of beneficial use to 70% of all dredge material. So this will fall into alignment with the coastal spine projects, coastal resiliency projects, beach renourishments, rebuilding marshes as well. And at present, the GIWW report to the Texas legislature is one that we're working on, and it will be highlighting the benefits of the GIWW and also recommending legislative actions. And we also, in working with our friends at MIRAD on marine highways, we're looking for opportunities to relieve landside congestion, reduce maintenance costs on landside infrastructure, and improve transportation's overall system of repair. We are also doing a container on barge feasibility study. Waterborne transportation is not only more economical, safer, but it's a lot more environmentally friendly when you look at the amount of CO2 that's produced to move a ton of cargo. Now, I think that one of the things that often gets misinterpreted is that we're trying to compete with other modes of transportation, and that's not the case at all. What we're trying to do is enhance other modes of transportation and allow as a relief valve for some of the congestions that we're seeing on our state highways and roadways. So that's always the first sort of speed bump to get over when we're having these kind of conversations about moving cargo to waterborne transportation. And basically, we're looking at, can container on barge service be competitive with other freight transportation modes with cost and schedule? So that's to be determined, but we feel that that there's going to be an opportunity to highlight the validity of this kind of transportation within the state of Texas. Okay, all right, so this is the beneficial use, as I was talking about, and we're looking to explore beneficial use of dredge materials for habitat restoration and protection along the GIWW, and create and restore marshes, bluebird islands, and renourish Gulf beaches. So the picture above here is the Pierce Marsh restoration, which was an 80 acres of marsh created from a single GIWW dredging event. So basically, in the past, you would dredge, you'd put it in a big pile, and you'd have a big pile of dirt, and then we'd call it a day and go home. And now with the Army Corps sort of taking the lead, and also, you know, the state of Texas realizing the value of doing beneficial use projects, we're actually creating habitat. So very proud of that. And we partner in cooperation with the Army Corps on all of the projects that we do for beneficial use. Let's see here. There we go. And waterways technology. So this is probably more aligned with what you folks are here for. We are actively building an AIS-based project. AIS is automatic identification system that every commercial vessel has. So we're designing heat maps to track where the congestion is, where these vessels stop, why they stop, and also capture real-time traffic on the GIWW. And at this point, I'd like to pause and just really say to Darren and the rest of the STR group, like how much we appreciate the collaboration and how much we rely on their guidance as we're sort of being bombarded with all this new technology that's coming into the port environment. And I think one of the challenges that we have is because port environments are fairly easily defined within parameters, and port folks are awful creative. So there's a lot of different technology sort of popping up, you know, across the globe that we're looking at. It's not the same as if you're going to try to introduce technology like autonomous vehicles into a nationwide system. So we're sort of juggling and depending on our friends over at STR to give us some guidance and light. But from this GIWW program with the AIS, what we ultimately would like to do is to build a digital twin of all of our waterways in the state of Texas. And this will give us a real-time view, so it'll give us access to how shoaling is being impacted by currents, also weather events. We'll know what sort of impacts are being realized by the waterways during these events. And finally, we had a very productive meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers. And they say that if we develop this, they're willing to take this into consideration as they're developing their dredging schedules. And the reason that this is important is traditionally what they've done is they've said our schedule is between mile marker X and mile marker Y, and then they've dredged it whether it needed to be dredged or not. I'm not saying it didn't need to be dredged, but now what we can do with a digital twin, we can sort of highlight where the hot spots are and get a much more economical deployment of the equipment that's needed, and then still keep the waterways open, hopefully at a lower cost and a more expedient manner. And we are also working now with a company. We're actually going to have a demonstration tomorrow that is utilizing autonomous vessels and AI to develop bathymetry models. So we're going to be doing one demonstration in Galveston and one demonstration in Sabine, Neches. And I hope I didn't take too much time because I really want to get to this panel. But if there's any questions, I'm open and available, or if we want to wait till after the panel is spoken, because these folks are representing the ports and they're much more in the weeds and have a much more detailed knowledge of what they're doing in each of these ports. So either way, good to go. Basically, the ports in the state of Texas, or the ports across the globe, are anchors and connection points in the global supply chain. They each offer a very unique perspective. One of the famous lines in the port industry is, if you've seen one port, you've seen one port. I think that there's a lot of things that they struggle with that are very similar, but depending on governing bodies and leadership, there's a virtual plethora of different ways to address some of these concerns and challenges that are faced before them. So I think the best thing to do here, we'll just start at the beginning and work our way down, and then have each of these folks introduce themselves, a little bit about the position that they hold within their organization, and then some of the challenges that they have faced, and then we can kind of develop an organic conversation based on that. So if that works, I will introduce to Rohit Saxena from the Port of Houston. Take it away.
Thank you, Gear. Rohit Saxena from Port Houston. In my role at Port Houston, I'm responsible for leading the planning group there. That includes short, mid, and long-term planning for the port, and not just within our terminals or our boundaries or at the gates, but also outside, how the cargo is going to go in and out of the terminal when it gets there. So that's what my team is responsible for, and I'm here to learn more about what other ports are facing in terms of the challenges and opportunities, and I'm very keen to learn it from my fellow panelists and anybody who's out there in the audience or online. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Jeff Pollock. I'm the Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer here at the Port of Corpus Christi. Welcome. We're thrilled you're here. Deeply apologetic to anyone who showed up to see my colleague, Omar Garcia, who's our Chief External Affairs Officer. But like all good external affairs guys, he's notoriously flaky and deathly afraid of public speaking. So sorry that you get B squad. Maybe I'll just backfill a little bit with some of what Kent shared. Port of Corpus Christi in 2023 moved about 200 million tons of cargo. We are now, by the numbers, also the largest strategic military port in Texas, in addition to being the nation's largest exporter of U.S. produced energy. About 85% of what we move on a daily basis is in liquid form. So while we are very much a multimodal hub, we have 60 plus miles of short line track, obviously moving things by vessel and barge, commodities by vessel and barge, and have some port owned and port managed freight corridors. Pipelines are a primary modality for us. So we think a lot about the nexus between pipelines and other modalities and the ways in which pipeline movements offset congestion in other modalities. In terms of my personal scope of the organization, I'm in my 6th year. The strategy line includes all aspects of our planning practice, all aspects of our environmental practice, from regulatory and compliance all the way through proactive stewardship activities like beneficial use and habitat creation. I personally am the tip of the spear for our decarbonization ambitions. So for me, most of my days are spent on either active carbon management through carbon capture, utilization and storage, or cultivating future fuels like low carbon hydrogen. So lots to say on that front. The last point I'll make, I think, is that it's a pleasure to be here and interact with you all in this capacity. I've been in the port about 6 years, but part of that ran the MPO here in the Corpus region for a little over 4 years. So sort of still recovering from that experience and It's a breath of fresh air to be able to interact with TxDOT in all the ways that the port does. So anyway, welcome again. Thrilled you're here and look forward to a great day together.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Phyllis Satoff. I'm the CEO at Port Freeport. It's been a long career there, except for 4 years up at Port Houston. So been in the port business since 1992. So seen a lot of change, and I've gone through a lot of challenges, but we continue to grow the port. It's now 13th in the nation in movement of foreign waterborne tonnage, consistently 6th in the nation in movement of chemical products, but growing rapidly in the roll-on, roll-off sector. And obviously, energy is a big part of our port as well. If you break our port down, it's about 40% energy products, primarily LPG, LNG, and then other refined fuels. 25% chemicals, and then again, just general cargoes that are moving across our public docks, anywhere from containerized cargo, large amount of green fruit, and obviously resin products going export. The roll-on, roll-off business, we're rapidly climbing in the ranks in the movement of new automobiles, import and export. Obviously, a lot of high and heavy equipment, both import and export. And steel, we're the import facility for all the steel going to the large Tenaris facility in Bay City. So very diversified, growing rapidly. I will tell you, between the port, some new businesses that we've been working with and that is soon start up this year in 2024, along with what TxDOT is investing just in State Highway 36 leading to the port. It's well in excess of $1 billion. That's just in the last several years that's been invested. And we're really excited about the opportunities, but it also demonstrates when we're all working together and looking at the opportunities, the freight flow from the water side, land side, and the connectivity in between, we can do a lot of great things and really generate real economic value from those dollars invested by all of us. So it's glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. Hi, I'm Jason John Michael. I am one of the senior strategists at the Office of the Secretary of Transportation, Research and Technology side. I'm in a new office that was created under the bill. The new office is called the Highly Automated Systems Safety Center of Excellence. That's a lot of words, so we just decided to call it the HOS. So what is the HOS and what does it do? So we're about 15 individuals. Most of them are senior scientists. I'm one of the 4 senior strategists that get to work with some of the smartest people that our country has. Why so few? We're kind of like a little geek squad in a way. So our job at the Office of the Secretary is to help the DOT as a whole ensure that it is capable to review, assess, validate, and validate the safety of all artificial intelligence within the transportation system. So that includes things that we normally think about, like self-driving, flying, and captaining things. But it also includes highly complex data systems and a lot of other things that go along with making a highly automated system work. And our jobs are not necessarily to replace the work of the operating administrations, like MARAD, for instance, but to help force multiply their work, right? And so finding ways to have a ask me anything kind of thing where the different modes can come and ask us questions, and then we can help build research projects and programs around their needs. Oh, and one last thing. If Darren brought lands in, then I'm definitely Tommy Bahama.
All right. So I can't believe you gave this up so easily. Did you actually say, ask me anything?
We're an internal service organization, so it's just to the OAs, not to the rest of the nation.
No, I guess maybe I'd like to bring up something. So the container crane situation in the United States and where we get those from is now being revisited. That was a discussion, I think, about a year ago as well, and it was determined it was, I guess, not an actionable concern at that point in time. Is, from your perspective, with the AI and the intelligence that are in these cranes, is that something that has become an actionable thing now? And is there going to be funding associated with that from the federal side?
So I'll speak to it from the technology side. I can't really speak to the funding piece. That has to be MARAD that talks about that. But from our side, I can tell you that we're actively investigating not only the technology, but more importantly, how that affects workforce in this situation. Because as we know, our ports are a large employer of our workforce, and there's a lot of things where, if you think about a current crane operation today, the human is in the loop a certain amount. Now, what we begin to see across the world, right, is crane automation and moving to remote operations of those cranes. And I think we're all pretty well accustomed to the fact that there's other places of the world that are moving faster than we are in this place. And in a lot of ways, I think it's our workforce piece that's one of those things that will help incentivize our ports to begin to make these investments, along with some federal dollar that comes along with that. But I think about it from the human in the loop perspective. So our humans are in the loop of that now. As we move to more automation, we're going to put them on top of that loop. Right. And eventually they're just going to be overseeing the loops that are going on. So as we think through the workforce component, I think it's really important for us to think about our current crane operators and what their jobs are going to be in not 20 years, but the next 3 to 5, because I think they're going to be seeing their jobs change that fast with how fast this is coming into the market. And I wish I could say how much money is coming, but I can't do that.
I guess I'll just take comfort in the fact that it's being taken seriously. And then obviously, once we define what the potential solutions can be, then we can have a conversation about how we move to the next.
And it's there in the bill. And I would say our office is currently reviewing a draft report from the GAO on port automation across all ports in the United States. In fact, I think some of you guys were part of the interviewees of that. And so that's going to provide a lot of good analysis across the entire U.S. port portfolio of what's happening where and who's doing what. There is a Leidos project in the Port of LA right now looking at remote inspection. They're doing just nuclear right now, but to where the CBP officers are not necessarily on site anymore. So as we know, as we automate things and remove humans, then it becomes, well, where are the humans at when I need them to come and inspect something?
No, I think it's in a dynamic environment, and sort of picking up on once you've seen one port, you've seen one port. I think that there's also a conversation to be had about the different collective bargaining units on the different coasts as well. But I think that we're fortunate here in the Gulf Coast with the collective laboring unit that we have here. So that's from an operational perspective. Anyway, I appreciate that, Jason. Here's a question for Corpus. So you're the #1 energy moving port, and I've been in conversations with people that are producing these products, and you try to have conversations about them. Well, why are ports important to us? I think it was Speaker Phelan who said it most eloquently, is we take what you put in the pipeline, we turn it into money, and then we export it to your markets. And if it wasn't for the ports and the refineries along the coast, there'd be no reason for you to even pull this stuff out of the ground. So I guess the question hidden somewhere in there is, do you feel that the energy, the folks that are actually taking the stuff out of the ground fully appreciate just how big of an impact Texas ports and the refining system that we have along the coast play into that?
Only when it's not working well. Now, I think there is actually pretty healthy awareness across the value chain from upstream to downstream. I think when we look at the downstream players here, so the folks who are either in a refining space, so refining either traditional energy products or a petrochemical process product, or if we look at the folks that are in that sort of purely midstream, the downstream end of the midstream niche, I think there's really good communication from upstream as to what's coming when. I think there's general recognition that downstream bottlenecks aren't good for anyone in the value chain. So yeah, I think the answer is yes. I mean, I think communication makes the world go round. There's always a potential for us to to enhance that sort of real-time responsiveness. I mean, I think that the perennial challenge for anyone in the infrastructure business, and that's fundamentally what ports are, is that infrastructure takes a long time to conceive, permit, and construct, with an emphasis on the permit part of that. I mean, the regulatory landscape is, and I think this will be a unanimous opinion from any port you talk to, the regulatory landscape is probably the limiting reagent in that responsiveness quotient. And so there's a bit of a mismatch in timeframes with markets and the way markets move, particularly in the energy space, and the way that we're able to respond with capacity downstream, number one. And then number two, there's a challenge because once you get infrastructure in or on the ground, it's got a really long lifespan. I mean, the incentive is to keep it operating for as long as possible. And there's a temporal mismatch between that lifespan and the pace at which infrastructure is becoming smart or smarter. So the mechanisms by which we have funds available to upgrade infrastructure or to take it out of service to upgrade it, there's a challenge there. So do I think the communication is there and is good? Yes. Do I think that we have some sort of wicked challenges with respect to mismatches in pace? Yes, I do, but I don't think those are low-hanging fruit. I mean, those are really fundamental challenges, but I think that's where we see the next increment in efficiency realized in that system.
Okay. So, Phyllis, I wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit. You guys move a lot of autos. You've gotten some new imports. You also do a lot of exports. So on the RoRo side of things, and I guess one thing in particular, vehicles are becoming so much more technologically advanced. Also, the influx of electric vehicles. Do you see any of the concerns or are the stories that I'm reading in the news sort of over sensualizing the lithium battery issues and components and pictures of ships on fire and stuff like that? Is that a reality in your world? Is that something that keeps you up at night, or is that just part of balancing the flow of trade in and out of the port of Freeport? Or Port Freeport, sorry.
It's okay. Well, it's an interesting discussion. I really was not that educated because we haven't been heavily in the RoRo sector until 2015. So, and hadn't seen or heard a lot about fires or things especially in and around the United States. But we heard about the one up on the East Coast, and then the growing concern, and you see the videos about the fires and how long, they take to burn out if you've got the lithium batteries involved. But in studying the ship fires, they've been the combustible gas. They've been gasoline vehicles that have caused the ship fires, and those are much more intense, very rapid. And but what we're finding is we don't train well enough, and we haven't prepared ourselves well enough for something that might happen along dockside and how to respond. Well, we sit in a small community with a volunteer fire department. They do have some people on staff. We don't have our own fire department. But we do have some waterside protection through the tug services that, are equipped with FIFI on board. So, we can rely on that, but we're better coordinating training and all at the port to respond to an event, just in general from combustion engines, which are still what are largely shipped, but that is changing. But learning what are the ways to best manage if it is a lithium ion battery situation on board a carrier. All of the ships are required to have their own plans and their own systems in place to contain. What you find is that sometimes once the agency that is, that definitely if it's occurring at a dock, that the agency that is on call to respond and lead the effort, sometimes the communication, getting that going, people thinking it's best to keep certain ramps or open up things, and then they cause the fires to expand quickly. So there's things that we have to learn, better communication, everyone understanding the difference of fighting fires in a building versus fighting one in in a ro-ro carrier because it's different. There are floors, there are levels, but they're still a lot different. So we're doing that. We've conducted trainings. We've done it at Freeport. We've volunteered and have been going to other ports, and we're knowing at a national level at the American Association of Port Authorities, there's a focus that's moving in that direction as well. So I think we're much more prepared than we were even a year ago, but we can still continue to improve.
Okay, so I mean, to the average person, then it's probably being exaggerated a little bit, but you're taking it seriously. Is that a
Oh, that's a great way to put it. You do have to, we all know news media now. It's entertainment. It's not just providing real time, real information. They're there for entertainment and viewership. So you really have to do your research. You can't just say, oh, they said they had lithium ion batteries on board. That doesn't mean that that's where the fire was initiated. And did it even contribute? Probably not. But it's a risk going forward because they burn longer. They're not as intense immediately, but the duration is longer, and getting in there and putting it out is more difficult because of how closely they are positioned on the vessels and moored, and just those risks. So, but there is technology being evaluated. New builds will be better equipped to deal with this, but it's how do you retrofit existing vessels in service today?
Okay, thank you. And then, Rohit, I kind of want to touch base with you. I mean, Port of Houston is expanding, seems like every day, right? You're growing at an unprecedented pace. I think the best thing and the worst thing about Port of Houston is that you're in the middle of Houston.
Yep.
Right. So as some of these new technologies that are coming out, so some of the ones that I've heard, and I just want to get you to confirm or deny, or actually I'm just asking the question. This is not an interrogation, but so some of the like the freight shuttle systems, I know the Boring Company has been interested. Obviously, we're looking at container on barge. What are some of the solutions that you see for sort of freeing up the potential and the capacity for the Port of Houston to keep growing?
Yeah, no, you're right. We have been exploring opportunities in terms of the freight shuttle and the Boring Company, as like in the two you mentioned. We have had meetings with them, discussions, and we are looking for solutions. But the challenge comes in how practical or realistic those solutions are. So that's something that we're still figuring out, and we probably need to figure it out collectively, not just as a port, but everybody else who's involved in the supply chain. And then if you think about the supply chain, ports are a vital link in the overall supply chain. We don't manage the supply chain, but if you take the port out of it, then the supply chain gets impacted. So if you think about it, if there is no port, there is not going to be any kind of cargo. No cargo means no commerce. No commerce means no jobs. So, and that's on the infrastructure side, and the other technological things that we are doing is, especially at our truck gates, that we are moving them much faster. So I think our turnaround time is now 45 seconds for the trucks to go through. So for that, we have deployed the technologies, RFIDs, OCRs, facial recognition, weigh in motion scales. So we're moving all of our gates from static scales to weigh in motion scales. So that just increases your throughput and your efficiency of moving the trucks, because you're getting a lot of cargo. So if you, just to put things into perspective, in 2016, we were doing about 2 million TEUs of containerized cargo. And last year we touched 4 million. So it's doubled in the last 7 or 8 years. And if we continue to grow at the same pace, how are you going to manage that? Because you're constrained in terms of your road networks, right? Your roads are not getting any wider. So, and 4 million TEU per year means approximately 15,000 truck transactions a day. So if you take it to 7 to 8 million TEUs, that means you're adding that much more trucks. So how do you move 30,000 trucks in and out of the terminals every single day? So that's a constant challenge that we are all grappling with, and we are looking at technologies. We are looking at different ways of doing things. And as Umar mentioned, you cannot build infrastructure fast enough. It's always, you're always running behind, you're always catching up, and it takes a long time to get the projects from planning to the execution phase.
Yeah, no, I can definitely appreciate that. And I think that one of the things that we've been fortunate with in working collaboratively with all the ports is to get a better understanding of what the actual needs are. And then taking that back to TxDOT as an organization and really, fine tuning that message and making sure that they understand from a port perspective why this matters. And as I said earlier with the container on barge study that we're doing, we're not looking to compete with anybody on anything. We're looking to substantially make the system as a whole more robust. And I think that, as technologies come and develop, and obviously we have our challenges, I think one of the ones that's bubbling up right now, whereas on the West Coast, labor and the environmental movement used to, walk lockstep, and now they're separating and people have difference of opinion, and obviously they want to protect their jobs, and I understand that fully, but sort of incorporating all this new technology that's being made available and presenting it so that it makes economic sense to make the investments, but you're not creating enemies along the way, and fairly powerful enemies, if we're going to be perfectly honest. And I think that the people factor is absolutely important. And I mean, these people showed up through the entire pandemic, day in and day out. So I think that would be one of the harder things to sort of balance. But looking at the time, just to keep us on schedule, I think I'd like to just open up and say, from each of your perspective, and we can start here with you, with Rod, what is like the one thing that's top of mind for challenges that you're looking to address, in the short-term future? I know that there's always the long and the medium, but like what I don't want to say keeps you up at night, but what is the focus of your attention on right now?
Okay, so the focus of my attention when I think about these things, I use the acronym WARP. So we all need to move at warp speed. So WARP is one of them, is workforce development. So how are you preparing the next generation of your workforce? A is your advocacy. You need to be advocating with your state representatives and federal reps and getting fundings available for those projects. R is resilient planning. So how do you bring resiliency? Like, now we've all experienced supply chain issues. We have all been through the pandemic. How do you make our ports more resilient? And P, for me,
those are the things that I think about at 3 a.m. Thanks.
All right, ditto on everything they've already said. Um, you know, a few years ago, we had our strategic initiatives and the focus was, getting a channel project authorized, getting it funded, building new berths, working with other agencies and partners to improve access to the port. And we've been successful in all of those areas and under the final contract for deepening and partially widening our channel. So now the focus is what else do we do to support our partners at the port to make their operations as efficient and profitable as possible so that they continue to want to operate at Port Freeport and they have the sustainability that they need. So I really think for us, it's sustainability, and that just brings in so many things. It's the resilience. It's, what types of fuels, alternative fuels are we going to need? What are the carriers? What do they need? Well, how do we prepare for all the different things that just that industry alone is trying to figure out right now? We felt like LNG was going to be, one of the primary fuels, but we've moved on to ammonia-based, methanes, hydrogen, we've got sails on ships. What is it that we need to do? So it's a very innovative period, but as a landlord port, it also makes it very difficult to know how do you invest next and who else do you need to attract to be your partner to provide the services and the things that are needed. And then you look at the technology. We're still not nearly as automated as Port Houston or a Virginia or a Long Beach in our container operations, but we've completed acquisition of an additional 100 acres adjacent to the port so that we have the access that we'll need to build the types of interchanges that will need to be built to support that with all of the technology. We've ordered new cranes. That's a perfect topic you want to talk about right now. You placed an order in November for 2 new Super Post Panamax ZPMC ship-to-shore cranes, and now having to explain to everyone, we still have physical people operating our cranes. Yes, there will be technology on them that will be put on by ABB, and we are very much involved in that. And no one is going to get just direct access to remotely do maintenance or anything else to our cranes. That we've got that separation. So again, cybersecurity. We don't plan anything without bringing our cyber folks into the discussion now. Because, just protecting our infrastructure and making sure that we are not compromised and our customers are not compromised is very much a priority. So there's a lot happening, and we're an organization of 40 people. So, we're going to have to, again, grow our human resources in our organization so that we can better prepare and respond to the demands that I think are ahead of us. And again, to keep us resilient and competitive. And it's a very interesting time to be in this business. Before, we focused on building infrastructure that would last 40 to 100 years. Now technology is changing yearly, or just look at AI, how fast that's changing. How did that get incorporated? We have to change our mindset. We don't have as much time to plan all of that. We've got to be much more nimble in our thinking and our planning. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to answer this question a little differently because, I don't run a port. We're a brand new office at the DOT. And so, from the most part, I'd say our near-term goals are to make sure that we get to meet a lot of folks and a lot of folks get to know who we are, right? And really, that's really it from the office standpoint. But from a port and port automation, port emerging technologies perspective, the things that I see that of the ports that I've already communicated with or with Marriott or GLS, I agree with you. There's once you've seen one port, you've seen them all, but some of the challenges that the ports are experiencing are the same. And that's because it's the science and technology is the same science and technology that it's disrupting, and it's not really disrupting yet, right? I mean, the level of disruption, if you were to look at it as like, how much soy sauce you put on your rice, it's not a lot, right? The rice hasn't turned black yet, right? So it's a question of, when do we begin to activate the workforce development piece along, and how do you align that roadmap with other people's roadmaps? So like one of the things that I'm working on right now with some ports in the greater in the Great Lakes region, sorry, are around not necessarily, the ports are doing their own things. Like this is Port of Cleveland, for example. But what they need help with from our side is building a better conversation around with DHS and CBP around, okay, well, if we do take on this next operation, that's going to be something small to start off with, and if we're good at it, then we'll get to not quite 2 million TEUs, but something like that, right? You're seeing the different ports around the country need to find ways to accommodate a containerization. That's where I think we're best suited as an organization, as my organization, is to help build those conversations around building and merging new project or new scope, be able to break down those policies across those different three-letter organizations so that we can find ways to work together, right, and create something new. So that's what's happening at the short term, and at the short term, it's also ports and advanced air mobility, right? So what if, right, you need CBP officers to do an inspection, right? Most of them are hanging out at the airport. Right? Where can you fly? Where can you fly now, or get FAA approval to fly? Over water. It starts to give yourself some questions about, well, there might be a better way to use automation, AI, and ML, and it's not necessarily to replace a human's job. It's just to make us more efficient. It's to make our ports more efficient in the same time, because the demand, right, is already there.
All very interesting. And I think this highlights, basically, I think the public's perception of ports is at the level of checkers, and y'all are playing three-dimensional chess, because you've got geopolitical concerns. You've got the Panama Canal, which is prime for moving energy products. You've got ZPMC, however that shakes out now. And then you still got to figure out how to keep the roads open and be able to accept the capacity of the cargoes that you wanted to move. So it's multi-fronts. So looking at the time, I'd like to stop here and see if there's any questions from the audience, because basically what you've got here is an incredible talent pool and an understanding for ports. So if you ever had a question. Yes, sir, Mr. Bass.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
We're good.
For Corpus, and speaking of collaborating, not competing with the bridge, no, it's been delayed, but how do you see when the new bridge opens up, it impacting your operations? What are you doing in advance of it opening to be ready to accept the bigger cargo ships? And what does that timing now look like when the bridge opens? And are you going to be ready when it does open?
The answer to the last question is absolutely yes. Because, we, as you know, that it's a little off the original mark. So we've had plenty of time to prepare. So is contrary to what you would see in the media, but that bridge actually won't change the size of the vessels coming into our inner harbor. The limitation in the inner harbor in terms of vessel class is the turning basins. We currently have what's the class of vessels known as Suezmax carriers in the inner harbor today. That will be the same with with the new clearance that the bridge allows. Those vessels will not have to ballast as heavily. So when they come in light today, when they come in empty, they ride very high in the water, and they have to ballast. They have to do what we refer to as the wheelie, technical term, in order to get on the bridge. And if you're standing back, it looks like their gear is gonna scrape the bottom of it. The margin of safety increases dramatically with more clearance. Our limiting factor in loading that class of vessels fully today has actually been channel depth. Now that we're going and completing the process of getting to 54 feet, it's been over a 30-year endeavor. More on that if you're interested. At 54 feet, we're able to fully load that class of vessels with a WTI spec of crude or refined products that are coming out of the refineries in the inner harbor. So the limiting factor then becomes, well, can the topside equipment at the docks fully load those vessels? Interestingly, 54 feet is also what a fully loaded ammonia carrier, the largest classes of purpose-built ammonia carriers on the planet, are likely to draw. So short answer is the bridge increases our margin of safety and operational efficiency for those vessels, but doesn't dramatically change our quality of life in the inner harbor. But we're still really excited about it.
So interesting, very expensive margin of safety.
Well, so can I put my MPO hat on for a second here? I'll dust it off and put it on. The impetus for replacement of that bridge was not primarily the port. I mean, the geometries of the existing bridge would never be constructed today. It has no shoulders. There's no way from a traffic management standpoint to deal with any sort of incident on the bridge. That margin of safety is well below the standard that the state has established. So, and it's a 75-year-old steel structure that's 25 years past its design life. So certainly the port is a key stakeholder and has been heavily invested in it. And there are some operational efficiencies to be gained in some respects, but we were not the primary impetus for that bridge replacement project.
Yeah, not to get it interesting, sounds like a new bridge could have been built, perhaps not at the height that the lowest part of the new bridge is going to be the top of the existing bridge, and might have come in a little cheaper.
I think that there's a real dollar value to that margin of safety with vessels coming in light. I mean, you should see one coming in that way, and I think it's a pretty compelling argument for that air draft.
So I'm going to do my best to like come sliding in here and offer some additional benefits. So I think one of the things that you mentioned was the ballast water management. So that increases actually a lot of efficiency because the vessels aren't doing ballast water management offshore. And it allows you to increase the flow of products coming out, which increases the revenues, which increases Fund 1 and 6 for TxDOT. So
yeah, not
to
mention the environmental implications, right? I mean, we know ballast water is a primary conduit for invasive species from different locales around the world, first of all. And in terms of so monetizing the environmental implications there and the margin of safety you gain in some of that avoidance, number one, and then secondarily, the operational efficiency, the fuel consumption and emissions associated with the time it takes for vessels to stall out and ballast. Those are real considerations and have a real dollar implication, both in terms of throughput, but also in terms of the local airshed.
So if Mr. Bash, you want to hold a post-construction risk assessment? No. A quick observation, and I think this will be the theme of the sessions that we hear today. The observation from an outsider is you guys do an unbelievable job. Not clear to anyone outside of port how sophisticated it is, but you do a really good job within your silo. Institutionally, one of your P's was partnerships. I believe this task force would say to you, for you to really advance, listen to the sessions later today with regard to where data, partnerships, technology, outside partners. I'm not sure the future of Houston, Port of Houston, is more truck loads. It's more automation of cargoes, getting on a horizontal elevator and getting to places further out where you're sorting your containers to different warehouses so they don't have to have all these links in the supply chain. I think in Corpus Christi, your synergy is actually your pipeline, right? Think of how many links you've taken out of the supply chain by being able to move a commodity via a pipeline versus how other bulk forwarders. So I think one of the homework assignments from today would be, how does this task force put laser focused light on the interface between your port and the rest of the transportation system to get use cases? I often hear, well, a port would never do that because we couldn't afford the risk or we couldn't afford that item. Eliminate that risk. You may be able to have an MPO or a TxDOT take the risk with regard to the transportation investment to see if it works. You know what I mean? You often are looking through the glasses of a port instead of looking at what are huge opportunities in technology and partners outside the port that may wish to take that risk to help on air quality or safety or reducing the queue of trucks around Houston or whatever that may be.
Well, I certainly appreciate that comment. And I think, from TxDOT's perspective, we've been focused on getting to know more in detail and understanding from each of the ports and then bringing different assets to the table. And in the growth of the Maritime Division, we've then brought people on that had MPO experience and really opened up a whole new world to us that we didn't know exists. So it's kind of like a unk, right? Unknown of unknowns. We just didn't know what we didn't know. And we're starting to develop that. And that's why, me personally, I think that this is a great venue for us to come to and for the ports to come to and start building those collaborations, because I don't think you'll find anybody here that's not willing to collaborate if it's for the overall good of the state of Texas, the economy, and the supply chain. So appreciate those comments. And we've run a little bit over, so I'm sure you can pull them aside later, and they'll be happy to talk to any specific questions.
Thank you,
So
Tommy.
thank you so much to the panel.
Tommy, thank you very much.
All right. We're going to transition to our next segment. I just wanted to mention, as we get set up, we do have coffee, water in the back. So feel free, as y'all need to, go back there and grab something and stand up and stretch your legs. Just want to say thanks to that panel. Y'all left us with a lot. We certainly learned a lot about the challenges, the variety of challenges and the common challenges at the Texas ports. And also enjoyed the emphasis on the significance of the Texas ports, not only to the state, the nation, and the global economy and supply chain. And now we're going to have a talk that is dedicated to data and digitization. We've got an online presentation coming to you from TxDOT. Just want to make sure that Allison and Chandra, can you guys hear us? And can we hear you?
Sure can.
Okay.
Can you see me?
All right. We can hear you. We just need a brief second to see if we can turn up the audio. If y'all don't mind saying hello one more time, just so we can check the audio.
Hello. Hello.
All right. Y'all feel free to take it away.
Great. And I think someone was going to pull up our slides. And you can go ahead to the next one. And I'll jump right in. Hello, good morning. I'm Allison Dane Camden, the new Deputy Assistant Secretary for Multimodal Freight Infrastructure and Policy. And Chandra, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Chandra Bonzi, and I work for Allison here in the office as the Deputy Director of Infrastructure Operations.
Great, next slide. So our Multimodal Freight Infrastructure and Policy Office, it is a very long name for an office, but we were named by Congress, created in the bipartisan infrastructure law, and I have not seen the slide advance. There we go. So back in 2021, when the Biden-Harris administration came into office, the president pretty quickly issued an executive order on America's supply chains. You saw TxDOT bring in John Porcari as a freight czar. He was replaced about a year later by General Lyons, former head of Transcom, really coming in, bringing the whole of government to focus on supply chains. I think we can all remember back in 2021, there was a lot of talk about Christmas being canceled, and it wasn't canceled. So we're all glad for that. I'm a parent, so I was very glad I was able to get the things my kids wanted. In March of 2022, we launched our Flow initiative, which Chandra's going to talk about in a few minutes. And then with the creation of the bipartisan infrastructure law, you're seeing, historic generational investments in ports, highways, other transportation infrastructure, both via formula programs that are going out to state DOTs and local governments, and then also through big grant opportunities. Next slide. So also in the bipartisan infrastructure law, Congress created this new office, the Office of Multimodal Freight Infrastructure and Policy. There's been in the past, there was a freight office, but it's gone away. And there were a lot of advocates really pushing for a freight office for a number of years. So championed by Senator Cantwell, this office was established in the bipartisan infrastructure law. We were given some really specific deliverables along with like a broad brush stroke to focus on freight. So our office is now overseeing state freight plans. We will be carrying out the national multimodal freight policy. We are designating the National Multimodal Freight Network, which I will talk about in just a moment. We are providing technical assistance. Once we're staffed up, we'll be providing more technical assistance to state and local governments, really focusing on supply chains. I did not expect to be spending a lot of time on the Red Sea when I took this job in September, but here we are where we're doing biweekly calls with industry to hear directly about how they're being impacted about what's happening in the Red Sea. So really the way I see this office is shining a spotlight on freight, really knitting together the good work that's been happening at the department for years around freight. You know, the Federal Highway Administration has a freight office, FRA, Federal Motor Carrier, Maritime Administration, all doing great work in the freight space. And I really see this office as shining a spotlight on it and knitting it together. We are located within the office of a secretary, so we're not within one of the operating administrations. We're up in the secretary's office, you know, trying to leverage all the good work that's been happening around the department. Next slide. I will talk really briefly about our National Multimodal Freight Network, which is a big focus for us in 2024. The concept of a multimodal freight network has been around since the FAST Act 2015. Congress authorized an interim network. The Obama administration attempted to make a permanent network in 2016. The Trump administration that attempted it in 2020. I am hoping that 2024 is third time's a charm and not a repeat of history as we're in the final year of this term. We're going to attempt any moment, we're going to have an RFI out in the Federal Register to start the process. But the goal by the end of the year is to have designated this network, which is really meant to be, think of a map of our most strategic highways, railways, waterways, ports, and airports that support goods movement and the supply chain. We're going to be doing an RFI where we're asking the owners and operators and users of the system to tell us the way we should be thinking about the network. There's a lot of goals established by Congress for the network. And so we're hoping all of those out there across the country who are doing the work, including many of you in the room, to tell us what's important to you as far as which highways should be on the map, which railways, which ports, etc. But really, I think we want to focus on flow. So we'll go to the next slide, and I will hand it over to Chandra to talk about our flow initiative.
Hello, everyone. I'm calling in today from Grapevine, Texas. I'm here at the retail conference, RELA, at the Gaylord Convention Center, working with our existing members in Flow, as well as making new contacts. I did want to give a shout out to a new member that we have is the Port of Houston. Mariah Smith has been our technical contact there, amongst others, but a big thank you for all the hard work. Flow began from a theory on paper just a couple of years ago. And it's really a data sharing program where the federal government performed sort of this hinge role. And we bring to bear specifically our ability to be a non-competitive partner in this space between the private sector. You know, for them, data sharing and privacy concerns are certainly high on the list, and even sharing amongst themselves. So we recognize that if we want to know what the problem is on the supply chain, that's going to come from industry. If we want to know how to fix it or actually fix it, that's also going to be industry. So what can we bring to the table? And that non-competitive partnership was front and center. Target's not going to share data with Walmart. Walmart's not going to share with Home Depot, all three of whom are current and active data sharers in the Flow program. So the Flow program is built through this public-private partnership with industry, and it's for their consumption. And in the middle there, right, we anonymize, we aggregate their data, we protect it. And the Flow program is one in which is geared towards industry involvement. And so our efforts are to recruit new industry partners and continue to grow that over time. We work in partnership with a USDOT agency, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, to continue to guard and protect that data that is shared with us. I think we have one more here. But one of the specifics of the data sharing, yes, you can advance, that would be great. So the goal is to provide value to our industry partners by showing innovative information they cannot get elsewhere. And that was very important. Our industry has partnered with us since the very beginning, and they were pretty clear. They're not going to stay involved or be involved if we can't provide value. So how do we do that? The innovative data that we do provide is one, our data is not forecasted or modeled. This is actual data. And it comes out of this system, which is already built, and it provides information on the daily. So it's every single day. Our data partners, so our industry partners, and our current flow program is limited to only asset owners, so not third-party data providers at this time. They share information, data with us also on the daily. And our goal is to better match supply and demand by offering information about total system utilization. Total system utilization is not data that is floating around. It is also not data that the private sector or any of its markets have been able to produce. And certainly given the competitive environment that is there, that is no surprise. So we get today's data in two ways, the demand side and the supply side. The demand side information we're deriving from our BCOs and ocean carriers. Our shippers are telling us today, 90 days in the future, what are my purchase orders? What am I buying? And the ocean carriers are telling us today, in 60 days, what are all of my ocean bookings? On the supply side, around specific port nodes, currently we have Port of Savannah, Port of Houston, Port of LA Long Beach. Port of Oakland is onboarding now, Port of New York, New Jersey, and we're continuing to work with any number of our ports. And we're collecting information there on terminal utilization, as well as warehouse and chassis utilization. So over time, what we're doing is we're providing, just as the way that you would the air traffic control tower and navigating the congestion. You can't do that if you don't know what your total capacity is. What are the total available slots at Port of Savannah today? You can find that out in Flow, right? So
if you're a Flow member, right, Chandra? If you're a Flow member.
If you're a Flow member, I do want to say that. And that's often a question from industry we get hammered with. They get very excited and then they want to know, how much does it cost? And we tell them that it is, we consider their payment to be their data sharing. And we certainly appreciate that from all of our partners. I do have we have an updated website with a lot of this information for folks, and I will drop it in the chat. And we are also on LinkedIn. Take lots of photos here as we're out and about at conferences, engaging conversations with those in freight and industry, and we encourage you to follow us there as well.
And I might just add with Flow, what we're trying to do here is make the supply chain more efficient and help us see around corners. So as we've got this crisis happening in the Red Sea with all of the major ocean carriers, diverting around the Cape of Good Hope, we're able to track very closely as we're hearing from folks that they're afraid of a big wave of container ships coming to the West Coast. And we're actually able to use Flow to look around those corners and see. Right now we're seeing a small uptick. All signs point more to a big April increase. But what we're hoping to do with Flow is to help us see around corners, make the supply chain more efficient, and ideally drive down costs. And I think that's our last slide, so we're happy to take questions.
And I'm not seeing any questions pop up in the room. We'll be asking for questions and takeaways from the audience later. Make sure and capture those and get them to you via the chat or email. And then hopefully there's some things coming in online. And then just one comment.
One quick question. Is there a way to see the membership, especially within our state, to kind of gauge, who all's participating and whether or not that might then lead to data that would be valuable to the transportation elements in the state?
I will say, I'm going to drop the website here, and let's see if I can get this to work. should redirect to our, drop it here. If I can get my phone to work, my computer passed away yesterday, sadly.
Chandra,
But,
I can look it up and drop it in the chat. I have a
That would be
computer.
great. Thank you so much, Allison. That has all of our active members there on our website. I will note that the data from Flow is not shareable at this time with anyone who is not an industry partner in Flow. Now we're 2 years in, and the goal is for the future to enable some sharing of the information. But as of right now, it is information for and from these specific industry partners. But we are open to recruitment amongst all of the industry. So if there are folks that you run into that are interested in industry in this tool, in this topic, please do direct them our way.
We have been focused on container imports to date, but in 2024 are hoping to expand to exports, budget dependent. We'll see what Congress does.
Right, and we're going to go ahead and transition. We just want to thank you all for the presentation. If any resources that are shared, we'll make sure and distribute those to the group.
Thank you so
And
much. It was great to meet with you all and have the time to talk about our office. Thank you.
Okay, our next topic is going to be on the energy transition for ports. Our moderator will be Steve Dellenbeck, one of our task force members. And the panelists, if you all can make your way to the stage, I'll meet you there with the microphone.
I don't think you can go to a transportation conference these days and not discuss the concept of alternative energy. And remind everybody, for the context of this panel, something that Darren said, that the task force is trying to look 5 and 10 years down the road. If you step back and you read what's happening across the world, there's all types of discussions about the demise of the internal combustion engine and how, we're not going to be a fossil fueled economy in 30 and 50 years. And I think most Texans all kind of smile and snicker at that and don't fully believe that. But there is a reality. We heard about how much oil the Port of Corpus Christi is exporting. And, will those levels continue forever? Probably not. So what we want to do in this session is have everybody self-introduce themselves and talk about what their role in their organization is. And then we want to have a discussion about alternative energy and what the ports need for infrastructure and also what they're doing within the port to address those type of issues. So Jeff?
Thanks, and sincere apologies to anyone who heard enough of me on the last panel. This topic is actually much more central and germane to what I spend every day doing. I think our entree into this story probably emanates from the transition that's afoot in our gateway today. I think we see fossil fuels and that cornerstone of our business as something that is here for the next 3 or 4 decades, at least, in some very recognizable form. And then much longer when we talk about biofuels, sustainable fuels of various types. But if you look at our project portfolio today, easily 80% of it is projects in the decarbonized hydrogen value chain, whether that's, and it will primarily be ammonia for the foreseeable future. Ammonia is also an emerging alternative fuel for vessels. There are keels being laid today that will be ammonia powered or dual fueled. So we end up being having sort of a multifaceted role in that energy transition. We are undoubtedly a hub for production of future fuels. We will also be a hub for the use of those future fuels in the maritime space and in the modalities that support maritime infrastructure. So lots to say about this and been looking forward to this panel. So thanks for the chance to be here.
Hi, good morning. My name is Laura Goldberg, and I am a Senior Vice President at Center for Houston's Future. We are an affiliate of the Greater Houston Partnership, which is the region's main Chamber of Commerce, and we work in hydrogen in 2 different ways. One, the center along with UT Austin and GTI Energy, were the founding organizers of the High Velocity Hub, which was one of 7 regional hubs selected nationally by DOE. Can't say too much about that at the moment, as we and our 7 industry, the 7 industry partners of High Velocity are in the middle of negotiations with DOE for a $1.2 billion grant. So more on that. Hopefully after the award is signed. And then at the center, we also work broadly with a range of partners, including Port Houston and others, around developing the Gulf Coast, the region, and Houston as a clean hydrogen hub. And we have 5 different work streams in that effort, including a focus on transportation is one of them, but also demand aggregation, international trade, market transparency, and standardability. So I guess I would also say on the topic that was raised initially, our main focus is the low carbon future. And that, could include fossils with carbon capture or anything that is lower and no carbon. And, for the immediate long-term future, we believe that'll be a range of fuels with, of course, our focus on clean hydrogen.
Great, thank you. Good morning, I'm Iga Hallberg. I'm with Gauge Zero. Gauge Zero is an infrastructure developer in support of charging electric vehicles, commercial electric vehicles. We are based in Austin, and I spend a lot of time with ports. Why ports? We see a really interesting opportunity in a transition of drayage vehicles. I probably don't need to define what that means, but it's fairly short movement of cargo and containers, specifically from ports to warehouses. My title is VP of Business Development and Partnerships. We heard the theme of partnerships a lot today, and I think we're going to continue to do that. And there are some of you folks that we know quite well. We know the folks at Port of Houston have been supporting the port and in anticipation of some of the funding that's coming up. Very excited about that. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we see as far as what's happening in Texas. Our company is relatively new because this is a really new industry, and we are just scratching the surface of what's happening from an infrastructure standpoint. And companies like us, we are developing what's called charging hubs, third-party charging hubs. It's really how we envision the future of, if you want to call it, truck stops. They're sophisticated truck stops, very sophisticated truck stops. Our background is in energy and infrastructure. We all come from large commercial utility scale, large solar, wind, natural gas projects, battery storage. We saw a major transition about 20 years ago in how the investment that occurred in renewable energy projects by the entrance of third-party financial institutions. And we're seeing the same development happening in this space. And the reason why I bring that up is our company has a partnership with a private equity firm with a commitment for $300 million to help develop the infrastructure that is going to be needed nationally. I'm going to hopefully I won't get tossed off the panel by giving examples of what we're doing in Southern California and New Jersey. Really similar, very similar profile for Freeport to San Diego, we're one of the finalists for an RFP there, and I'm happy to provide some really interesting examples of what other ports have done from an electrification standpoint. And we're doing quite a bit of work also with partners such as Hillwood and Alliance Texas. And so thank you again for having me. This is really exciting, and I'm really excited about this conversation.
Thank you, Iga. Thank you for prepping everyone for the California conversation. My name is Emily Spath. I'm the lead project manager for Maritime and Off-Road at CalStart. It's headquartered in Pasadena, California, but is nationally has offices in New York, Michigan, Denver, and 2 offices in California. So we are a nonprofit that is focused on advancing and promoting clean transportation nationally and globally. Globally, we lead a memorandum of understanding called the Global Drive to Zero, which has, I believe, now 16 signee countries, all dedicated on zero emissions trucking. And then we also administer multiple voucher incentive programs from New York, Massachusetts. There was one in Chicago previously that are focused on zero emissions trucks and buses. And in California, we also administer 3 programs, all dedicated to zero emissions, called HVIP, which is truck and bus. We do Energize, which is the infrastructure side of that equation, so electric and hydrogen infrastructure. And then also CORE, which is Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Program. And then relating to ports, there are 11 categories in CORE. 3 of them are commercial hovercraft, cargo handling equipment, forklifts, as well as many other mobile power units. But thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So one of the challenges that we've talked about in the task force over the years is electric. Where is the charging infrastructure? You can read all types of articles about how behind we are with charging stations. And now people are floating the idea of hydrogen, and apparently hydrogen just magically shows up. There's a tremendous issue behind infrastructure on hydrogen. As a side story, we just completed a hydrogen refueling tank project in our company that cost 4x the original cost, and it took 3 times as long. We're an R&D company and actually understand how to use hydrogen. It's incredibly expensive. So what I'd like to ask is, what are the needs and the challenges for infrastructure within the ports? There's a tie to wanting cleaner air, et cetera. So yes, there's an advantage to using electric drayage vehicles and so forth. But how do you equip your port to handle those type of technologies?
Y'all okay with me starting that one? It's hard is the answer. And I think we have to be honest about what fuels make sense for what classes of vehicles. I think, and I think we have to look beyond our feet with respect to what the limiting factors are going to be in scaling up each of those different alternatives to internal combustion. I think everyone in the room knows what some of the challenges are with electrification. There is a glass ceiling in terms of scalability of electrification at the moment. Certainly there are challenges with a distribution network for hydrogen. If I'm predicting the future, I think the consumer marketplace and light duty vehicles, electrification is the immediate and intermediate future. If for no other reason, because the proliferation of infrastructure is already well underway. Creating an analogous network for hydrogen will be a time-consuming and expensive undertaking. I think my perspective on hydrogen is that the large-scale, world-scale even, projects that are manifesting in our port and in other ports on Texas coast that are primarily about producing hydrogen to yield derivatives that are born for foreign markets end up being the primary underwriters, the initial underwriters of some of that consumer level infrastructure, because once you're producing hydrogen, it's easier to produce more hydrogen. Once you're building pipelines to connect that hydrogen to industrial end users, you already have pipe in the ground that can serve a consumer marketplace. I think having, from a policy standpoint, policies that help us have an honest conversation about the limitations of different alternatives. And I don't mean to sound like a transition cynic in any way. I hope I come off more as a transition pragmatist, but I think we have to look down the road at what the limiting factors are in scalability in these alternatives, and then be discerning about the hierarchy of vehicle classes and aspects of mobility that we're trying to transition with different alternatives. But the answer here, I think, is that "and" is the operative word. It's not going to be a matter of electrification or hydrogen. It's going to be electrification and hydrogen. And the faster we can find ways to repower our electric grid, decarbonize our electric grid with some creative solutions, the easier it's going to be to do these different things.
Okay, I'll echo most of what you said. And right, it makes sense to find the right fuel for the right use. And, where can hydrogen go that other places can't go? What are the hardest to abate sectors where hydrogen makes sense? And, it's important, obviously, to see where the customers and where the markets are going. And whatever we can do to help aggregate demand, centralize demand, to help kickstart the market. And I think most people involved in hydrogen, are waiting to see what is going to happen with the 45V regulations. Will there be changes, significant changes at the margin? But I think we're tracking more than 35 projects of different kinds of hydrogen that have been announced in Texas, and the vast majority of those are not through FID, and a lot of people are waiting to make their decisions on where they go pending what happens with 45V. So policy support, market issues, partnerships to aggregate demand, honest looks, as Jeff said, at the infrastructure costs. And I think public perception also plays a role in a lot of these conversations, educating the public, getting at, what are the perceptions of safety concerns and what industry and government are prepared to do to make sure we're addressing any potential safety issues. And these are difficult decisions when you're, as we've heard, making a lot of decisions now on millions and millions of dollars for infrastructure of the future. And, what are we going to see the marine? Is it hydrogen derivative when it uses hydrogen? Seems like ammonia is out to an early lead. And a lot of the companies in Houston are also have an eye towards, what does Europe want? What does Asia want? And, where can we in the Gulf Coast be competitive on bringing those fuels to other markets? Tremendous amount of interest. We at the center led a delegation with 20 companies to Germany and Poland last year, who were all interested in talking to us about hydrogen markets. And we get inbounds lately a lot from Japan, Korea, and other places in Europe. So there's a tremendous interest in this, and we shouldn't be overlooking it, but we need to figure out obviously what's economically feasible and to get us there.
To share this one. So I spend a lot of time talking to fleets, and what we're trying to address are the 15,000 trucks that are coming in and out of the Port of Houston every day that are and again, some of the numbers that we see just from a standpoint of emissions from a lot of these diesel vehicles, it's a very small percentage of total vehicles on the road in the United States that are causing fairly significant portion of some of the air quality problems that we're dealing with, especially around the ports. That's why it's such a hot topic around ports. And I have tremendous respect for the team at the Port of Houston with the ambitious ESG goals. And what's really unique about Texas is that we don't have the same, regulatory mandates that some of the other states are starting to push at. And the fact that we're having this conversation, that we're being hosted by the Texas Department of Transportation, I think is a phenomenal, indication of what we're going to probably do differently in Texas than we're doing in other states. To get back to the original question from a standpoint of infrastructure, and I want to go back to Jeff's comment that the fuel has to match the use, and it's not one or the other. We know that hydrogen has a role and has a role for maybe different kind of, use. We at Gauge Zero have a really strong belief that we can start electrifying, especially drayage and last mile delivery today. And those match the needs. The vehicles match the routes, the operations of those fleets.
We have a lot of challenges that we have to unfortunately still deal with. You know, you had made a comment about what's one of the biggest challenges that keeps you up at night, and it's, you know, permitting. And we likewise think about infrastructure. These are long planning cycles. I love the concept of just-in-time infrastructure. I don't know if I've ever heard that concept, but I mean, we definitely see that just from our standpoint. Again, within my title, I have a role of creating partnerships, and it's utilities are the number one issue for us. It is access to power. When we are developing infrastructure, we're applying for 6, 7, 8 megawatts, and that is not easy to come by, except for maybe in Texas, where it's, well, how many do you want? Sure, when would you like it? But these are very serious issues, and we don't, it's a challenge in other areas, in other states, especially in Southern California, where in fact we have all these mandates and incentives, right? So you have money there, you've got mandates there. We get asked a lot about, hydrogen trucks. So I don't know how many of you have an idea of how much, let's say, a Class 8 tractor that moves containers, or traditional drayage truck, a diesel truck, costs $120K, roughly, a brand new one with, bells and whistles. An electric version is almost $500,000. So, the incentives that we talk about that CalSTART is pushing for, we're seeing so much movement in vouchers, for an example, to help offset the cost of these vehicles. Because it's not Pepsi and Walmart and Schneider they're buying those electric trucks and hydrogen trucks right now, but it's 96% of the trucks that are out on the road are small owner operator firms, and so they don't have access to capital like that. We're doing everything in our power to develop a network of financing institutions, people that can help write grants, vouchers. This is a very complex issue to help the owners, operators, small fleets and large fleets that are coming in and out of the port. And the port, what's fascinating is it has a role to play, and from a standpoint of creating opportunities, incentives, so much of it is really, it's your customers, the terminal operators, the shippers, that are the ones that are creating more of an incentive, paying more for zero emission deliveries. It's a whole economic development process, and multiple, parties that are involved in helping create a reason why we would even want to start to transition to electric vehicles. I kind of went off on a tangent, but back to the question of infrastructure. What's really interesting from a port perspective, it's back to this issue of where do the fleets charge? Where do they fuel? Let's use the word fuel, because it's really all multiple different fuels. And yes, we're going to be using traditional, diesel as a fuel for these fleets. Where do they operate? Where do they domicile? What are their routes? And it's really very much focused on finding the right partners for the ports to really work with, to start to help to transition whatever that is, whether that's electric or it's hydrogen, whatever it is. And then, companies like us that have an incentive, have an interest in working with the ports and figuring out, and actually the Department of Transportation, very important part in all of this as well. Where are those routes, and where is it important for us to be able to provide infrastructure? So it's not, it's allowing these fleets to operate and extend their operations beyond, for an example, just the 10, 20-mile routes that they're running today. I'll pass.
I'll just go off of those, give a real quick explanation on voucher incentive projects in case anyone isn't familiar. The whole goal is to take your grant funding, state or federal, and it matches the ZE, zero emissions equipment price, and matches the delta to the diesel, so that your small sole proprietor, small business are paying that diesel price, but for a zero emissions truck. or off-road equipment, or assisting in installing that infrastructure. And the goal is market acceleration, right? You have people that are willing to try these zero emissions, but they just don't want to pay 4 or 5 times as much for it. So if you lower that price, you hope to increase adoption. And as you increase adoption, the technology improves and the technology becomes cheaper as more people have it. So yeah, CalSTART is loves to promote voucher incentive projects as a way to get those grant funds out. And it also allows you to not identify your end user as you start. You have a voucher application process. And so as the funds are released, people can apply over time, and that money can be released over time instead of buying 50 trucks in one get-go. And then also to go off on the infrastructure side, instead of talking about drayage and trucking, I want to talk about the on-port, the off-road, the on-dock technology, which is really important to get ports operating as well. And we just know from the technology readiness level right now that not everything can be battery electric. Some things are going to have to be hydrogen, probably permanently. And then in the case of ocean-going vessels, we can talk alternative fuels. And the biggest problem I see right now is space. Ports need space to make money, and anywhere you're installing charging infrastructure or hydrogen infrastructure is taking away from the space where you're going to be having, maybe you have containers, or if you have bulkers or whatever you're having as your cargo. Another big, and I guess way to get through right now is the duty cycles of them, right? Battery electric, yeah, you don't have time to charge your forklift for 8 hours, and your port's a 24/7 operation. And so that's where we really see hydrogen coming in, right? You can refuel in 15 to 20 minutes on a hydrogen fuel cell forklift or container handler instead of having to wait overnight to charge. But you have ships that are coming in. Those ships want to get out as fast as they can. So we really see it is an and solution. You have to have battery electric and hydrogen in order to meet all the needs of a port and that ecosystem.
Thanks. Let's switch a little bit. Iga and Laura both sort of hinted at something I wanted to ask is natural disasters. As most of you know, the Texas Gulf Coast is kind of a catcher's mitt for hurricanes, and depends where they hit. When those type of things happen, and if a refinery goes off operation, 2 days later the price of gas goes up $1.50. So it's a big economic impact. Well, the same thing with shipping. You have to run 24/7. So I'd be curious what some of your perspectives are as we look at energy transition and someone, let's say you convert your whole port to electric vehicles, and then the electrical grid's down for 2 or 3 days because of Storm Uri or something like that. So what are you doing with the infrastructure, or what do you recommend be done? And I'm going to start this time just to shake it up, let Laura start and come back this way. You look at alternative energy and that type of thing. What should ports be looking at?
I mean, I think this gets again to the necessity of an all of the above approach. We need generators, we need battery storage, and I think we've seen in Texas a significant amount of growth in the capacity of batteries. So, and it will say this question is not necessarily my area of expertise, but I interface with a bunch of people who do talk about these things. And what I often hear is, right, that we need to have a variety of fuels that can pivot or can handle any situation. And, battery storage is a key component of that. And frankly, we all need to be making the separate, in addition to thinking about the fuels, the dual track of resiliency across our operations and, in our also, thinking about what we can do to mitigate climate change. So all three of these things need to work together is, mitigation, adaptability, and disaster planning. And I think, from my perspective as a Houstonian living through Harvey, which, was nothing you could imagine really, frankly, until you lived through it. And then, now we are seeing, extreme winter storms. So you really need to be thinking about adapting and preparing for all of these kinds of disasters, plus whatever new thing is coming our way.
Yeah, quickly. I think bottom line, diversification and decentralization are the prescription for resilience. I think for us, that means bringing as many different and robust sources of decarbonized electrons onto the grid as possible. while bolstering the transmission required to accommodate those. In the port environment, that means thinking about microgrids and the capacity to island critical infrastructure. We have not cracked that nut. We have not yet figured out, what our first use case for a microgrid application will be, but we know it's coming. We have some ideas. Our port is also not as conducive to that as some others that have more isolated terminals. But for us, I think, and when you look at the hydrogen marketplace and you look at what this is going to get pretty nerdy for a second, but when you look at what the 45V guidance is doing to the hydrogen marketplace in terms of incenting decentralization of hydrogen production, co-location of that hydrogen production where you have renewable production. So for anyone who's familiar with that guidance, it requires regionality and time matching and new build of renewables in order to get the full production tax credit for hydrogen. Basically means that in order to get that full tax credit, you need to be making your hydrogen where you're making your electrons. That induces a degree of decentralization that is probably ultimately good for the grid. What's good for the grid is good for our collective resilience. So it's going to be painful to get there, but there are some benefits of it. So I'll maybe some differing opinions slightly about the future of the hydrogen marketplace. But for us, the bottom line is diversification, decentralization.
Great comment. I think that's really fantastic. From an infrastructure standpoint for electric trucks, one of the tenets of our company is the strategic core of our company's resiliency, and not just in disasters. This is, we are guaranteeing 99.6% because there's always that stat there for downtime for the chargers for our customers. That means that anytime that truck is going to pull up into our facility, the chargers are going to be up and running and available to charge those trucks. This is, a significant transition, and there are a lot of, concerns around not only range anxiety, but also availability of charging for these companies. And so this is something that we plan for. That's our, background. Our company's background is energy management. And in essence, that's really what we sell, right? We are here to provide reliable, cost-effective charging for our customers. All of our sites have battery storage, and majority of them have on-site solar generation with canopies over the trucks. And, we will continue to look at all of the most advanced technologies available to continue to optimize around, energy availability. And one thing that I just want to say really quickly, this is a topic that we have with our customers all the time, because there's a question about, what happens in a disaster where it's not just, 1 or 2 days. Even in Austin last year, I was out of power in my house for 6 days for a whole different, unrelated issue. So these things just happen. And a lot of our fleets are planning for that by just it's going to be a long time before they switch 100% to some of these zero emission vehicles. So they're looking at a transition, and 10%, 20% max of their fleets for some time. And again, this is if you're talking about millions of trucks, that's a pretty significant number of zero emission trucks to have on the road, to have infrastructure available that is, accessible and reliable. So, but from our perspective, battery storage, on-site generation, so distributed power, very much our strategy and path forward.
Yeah, just to add on to the resiliency and on-site generation side, we've seen started to see some pilot projects for hydrogen-powered shore power and a containerization. And obviously a big drive for that one, you're getting off the grid. Hopefully you have yourself more resiliency if you do have blackouts, or you're trying to avoid paying those extremely high energy costs. And so that provides, again, more resiliency to the port on its own. And these new coming out technologies, I think, will be anywhere from 1 to 3 megawatts of shore power from a hydrogen standpoint, which might be helpful when you have a hydrogen hub and you get that infrastructure developed as well.
So I have an either or question for you, and we'll start with Emily on this. We'd probably be remiss if we didn't talk some about human capital. We're talking about infrastructure, et cetera, the big word of workforce. As you start seeing transition to different energy types, What are your workforce needs? How are they evolving? How are they changing? Or if you'd rather answer, what about automation? When we go to different type of energy sources, there's alternatives for automation. So take a swing at either one or both if you feel really moved.
So I feel like we can do both. We can tie them together pretty well. I will say there's obviously some workforce development that's going to be required with these new technologies. Some of my background, went to a maritime academy, and so I have a license for unlimited horsepower. And I just renewed last year, and I can tell you that all of my firefighting classes had nothing to do with lithium-ion batteries. Which is kind of problematic when you're the one that's going to be on the ship doing the firefighting and coming up with the plans. And so clearly throughout, if the people on the ship need upgrades in their training, you're going to need that training in your workforce as well. They're going to have to learn how to identify problems with this new equipment. It's not the same as a diesel engine where you're listening to it and you're like, I can tell something's off. You have to learn how to identify those no problems, as well as how to interact with the new interfaces. From that also, we can talk about autonomous or automation. And yes, your workforce will have to be developed on that, but we've all heard that there's kind of workforce shortages. We've been having issues getting people into these jobs in the maritime sector, in the ports and the shipyards. And sometimes that automation can go hand in hand. If you can decrease the number of people you need there on the ground, maybe you're increasing their quality of life. They're doing something that's a little more office-y than being completely in the yard or on the port all day. That being said, we've also had some issues with the unions requiring whether or not things can be autonomous. One of the programs I work on, CORE, is not allowed to fund anything that gets rid of an operator. And so that came from the unions in California to make sure that they were keeping their jobs.
I really love this question, and I would love to give you an example of a RFP that the Port of San Diego put out last year that we are one of the finalists for and should be hearing a final decision in the next couple of weeks. So the Port of San Diego is very similar to Freeport. A lot of car transport. Pasha is moving a lot of vehicles between Hawaii. Dole's one of the major terminal operators, a lot of fruit coming in. It's a very unique port in the sense that the proximity to the community is actually, it's not too dissimilar from Port of Houston, where you have a lot of residential areas that are close by with a very active community. And so the port put out an RFP with an amazingly strong community involvement aspect and request in the proposal. And so from our perspective, a big portion of the RFP came back as workforce development and community engagement. The amount of work, very creative, I think, ideas that came out of that, everything from providing air filters, for an example, for residents in the area. We did a massive traffic study to improve potential, flow of vehicles in the area. We are providing STEM programs for, schools, for an example, in the area. From a workforce development standpoint, there's tremendous opportunity for everything from maintenance of these new vehicles, which is, again, different than your traditional ICE engines. I know that, for example, a lot of the majority of the dealers that are selling, whether it's the new Volvos or e-Cascadias, all their technicians have to get new certifications. So it's creating an opportunity for workforce development. We have, staff that's there 24/7. And, there are so many opportunities to create ways for these projects to be benefiting the community. From a port perspective, I can tell you this is very unique because from an infrastructure standpoint, we predominantly invest in private land to host our sites. But for the Port of San Diego, for the Port of Long Beach, for the Port of LA, those are all on-site charging stations that we are interested in developing with tremendous rent potential for the port and upside in revenue share. So there's a great, economic incentive to do something that's port facing. But then from an environmental justice and a community involvement, huge opportunities for that as well in workforce development.
So I think we think about this in a couple of ways, mainly focused on imperative and opportunity. And I think right now, as as you all know, there are a lot of federal dollars at stake, a lot of grant opportunities opening up really all the time. And all of these grant opportunities include community benefits plans requirements and workforce development plan requirements with a focus on where can we go into historically underserved communities and really make a difference with workforce and job opportunities. And this is another example of an area that requires partnership. You need industry at the table at the beginning. You need government at the table at the beginning, and you need the range of community colleges and colleges at the table at the beginning. It's industry that's going to be employing the workforces, and we need to understand at the beginning, what are their skills needs, what are their skills gaps, what kind of non-traditional pathways for employers are we willing to think about? What can we do different that requires a certain certification now that maybe doesn't need that certification? And then what community agencies can we be working with to think about what are the wraparound services and the roadblocks to potential employees that prevent them from getting the training and getting to work? We were talking with some partners in Port Arthur, and you have a training program, you have the opportunity, but you really talk to some of the potential users of these programs and they don't have the transportation, or they have other roadblocks that would get them from, doing the training and taking the job. And so, now is the time with all this, these projects, the money, really to think about plans and upfront planning and, what does industry really need? What jobs do we need to be training for at the lower end, the higher end, and the top end to make sure that we're all involved in the planning process?
Thanks, and I'll be quick. I think Laura touched on what I consider the salient point to Mike's preview earlier. Certainly, partnerships are the key to realizing the opportunity implicit from a workforce standpoint in this transition in which we find ourselves, the era of and in the way we power our lifestyles, not just mobility. I think locally we see the portfolio of hydrogen projects in the hydrogen value chain of any type as a real opportunity for incremental workforce development to bring segments of the community into the energy workforce that have historically been excluded from it for one reason or another. And some of that exclusion is due to completely unexpected circumstantial factors. And so I think the idea of wraparound services to try to break down some of those barriers, to leverage the opportunity afforded by a new market segment, a new commodity development, because right now it is incrementally new. It's not a replacement of all that we're doing today. It augments it. So I think it's incumbent on us through partnerships with local academic institutions, training institutions, and community institutions to not only think about what the training itself looks like, but how you make sure you can get that training to folks who have historically not had access to it. That's how we really realize the potential in terms of incremental workforce development that this moment in time, I think, offers.
Well, see, Andre is about to give us the hook here. So, you have a question? Anybody have a question they'd like to ask?
Quick observation, Steve. You go back to your situation. You were funding a hydrogen refueling station within the confines of your particular company. The world we live in is processing this across a whole bunch of cost allocation schemes. And when you look at climate change, which is equivalent to a hurricane, but people don't know they're in a hurricane, and you look at the ozone crisis in our metropolitan regions, which we're in that same crisis, but we don't know we're in a crisis. We now have new particulate emission standards coming online, which will be the next crisis that we don't know we're in a crisis. In Texas, we still have coal fired electric plants. Just think about this. This isn't, I don't want to pick on a third world nation, but this isn't a third world nation. We should not have coal powered electric power plants. All of these constraints are actually, if you flip the coin over, positive elements. It's not a challenge in workforce. This is a great opportunity for us in workforce. These are much higher paying jobs and safety elements that come along with it. But for metropolitan regions to go ahead, and in our case, we won 5 hydrogen fuel cell refueling stations. 3 of them are outside our region, so you can imagine the challenge that's going to be for us. And we have partners in Houston and others as part of this particular team. We do wish to co-locate one near the Port of Houston for obvious reasons. But when you allocate these investments across all of these allocation systems, for us to replace the physics does not make sense for heavy duty diesel replacement in electric batteries. My background is in engineering and physics. It is the stupidest conversation I've ever had to carry around thousands of pounds of batteries when you're in that particular business. Hydrogen fuel cell electric technology is a major breakthrough that we really, especially in Texas, we need to take and ride all the way as far as we possibly can, because it's a game changer for our particular state. So you're correct about the economies if you're in a small world and you have to allocate these costs and revenues. But American Airlines is not in the fuel replacement, the airline replacement business anymore. They don't buy airplanes. They lease all their airplanes. So you can't predict what that small truck operator of the future is going to be. He may not be owning these trucks. These may be major investments in leasing operations that make the economies of scale that you pay back at a diesel rate for your cost of this hydrogen fuel cell vehicle that is cross monetized with a whole bunch of other people that are actually seeking the benefits of it, not just the truck provider. So the whole econometrics of the future of this, we can't even begin to look at. And you know, we have it easy. We think this is hard. 100 years ago, someone invented a combustion engine. We had to pave roads and develop refueling stations. Man, that was hard. I couldn't imagine how hard that was. We got it easy compared to them.
It's a great point, because it really comes down to economics in the end. And so, have we figured it all out yet? No. You know, we're obviously very dependent on funding and grants, both on a state level and federal level. From an infrastructure standpoint, I could tell you that one of the reasons why we're bullish on this space right now and our business model is to take those capital expenditures and make them operating expenses for these fleets, right? So we're putting up our own capital in order to put in the infrastructure. In many cases, we're helping with providing financial support for these fleets. The business, it's kind of taken on a number of different names: charging as a service, infrastructure as a service, transportation as a service, but it's doing exactly that, so that, you know, if you're a small operator, you don't have to buy these trucks. You know, Ryder, Penske, Merchant, they're all buying thousands and thousands of all across the, all classes, step-up vans, box trucks, Class 8 tractors. So it's starting to transition, starting to happen. And I think you're going to hear more and more about that business model, which is innovative, which came from purchase power agreements for solar power and wind back in the 2000s. So you're right. It's just starting to happen, but you're going to hear a lot more about that.
Well, thank you for the observation, Michael. And if everybody could join me in thanking the panel for their time today.
Now we're going to transition to another dedicated presentation, and then we'll have one more panel afterwards. So we've got Terry Bills, who's going to walk us through a presentation, a little bit of a case study on data and digital twins ports.
I always like to start with a little cautionary note. This is the latest Gartner hype cycle that they've really published. You can actually see where the digital twin is. It's really at the height of the hype. And so for a number of organizations, I suspect there's going to be some pain to be gone through before we really get to that slope of enlightenment. one of the things that I think is really critical is that you really understand what the business case and what you're going to do with a digital twin. And I think that this quote, you really have to marry the business unit together with IT. And that really has to be a really tight marriage to really be successful with a digital twin. 4 key, very quick rules. One, and again, just reinforce, you need to be very clear about what you're going to do, what's the business requirement for your digital twin. I do believe that you should actually start small and expand over time. Don't try to go for the big bang with your digital twin. But that said, you need to think about where your end result is going to be. Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve at the end? And ultimately, that you really need to build data governance in from the beginning. Now, you probably noticed that those 4 rules probably apply to just about any IT project that you could think of, but it's especially critical here. So key uses for a digital twin, it actually gives you a historical or a baseline. Probably the most important from my perspective is that you really use it for operational performance monitoring. That is, how do we actually monitor and actually even operate our port in real time with our digital twins? And then ultimately, how can we test alternative scenarios? We can test them on our twin before we actually go through the pain of implementing them in our real world case. So how do we start? I guess the good news is that the ability to capture a lot of the data that you really need for your digital twin, whether it's 2D data, whether it's 3D data, whether it's bathymetric data, all of that has become much, much easier in today's world than it used to be. And I'll show you a few examples here. We have actually technology, it's called reality capture. It allows you to bring in data from drones, from aerial imagery, from LiDAR, point clouds, any number of different sources, and really bring that together, manage that, and then really use that to create your digital twin. So let's see if this is going to, no, let's, okay, you turned it into a PDF? Okay, well, anyway, what we were going to show you is that we can actually take a 2D, extrude to a 3D, and you really can create an incredibly detailed, and we were going to show you a city. Most cities around the world have actually created a very, very highly realistic 3D model of, in fact, their entire city. And these are not just pretty pictures. These are, in fact, they have data, and you can actually analyze and really use them to a great extent. Again, here's another one that had some action. So I think the slides are available. I would encourage you. They'll hand those out, and I would encourage you to go back. On the lower right is actually we have a partnership with Autodesk where you can actually pull those Revit, those 3D models directly into our technology, and literally on the upper left, it spun around, and it was an incredibly realistic view of the Circular Quay in Sydney, Australia, and both above and below the waterline. This is back to the point that you want to have that long-term view of what you want to do. This is actually from the Chief Operating Officer at Southern Ports in Australia. And so they're actually creating and have created a digital twin. But what they're really doing is they've started really with asset management, and they're going to go around that circle one by one by one. So again, start small, implement, and then move to subsequent applications. And so there's one view. And again, if you see on the top, they have both a 2D and a 3D view of it, and they actually operate 3 different ports. So we're looking at the 3D view here. We're looking at a building, and oh, by the way, that's everything at the port is fully instrumented. So I'm actually looking at a particular building, the temperature, the humidity, everything inside that building, as that's critical to the operation of the port. Again, you're looking here, you're looking at the cranes, and oh, by the way, every crane is also in high detail. So in fact, they know every one of the pieces of that crane. They know the operation of that crane in real time and are monitoring that in a way that gives them real-time performance optics of, in fact, their entire port. And you can actually see the performance of every one of their cranes. Most ports are now fully instrumenting their ports, any number of sensors. Again, the southern ports, they're really monitoring water utilization in real time across the port, and they're monitoring that over time. So again, this is the type of information that you're really capturing in real time. And again, because they're focused on asset management, they're really looking at the condition. They have every one of their assets mapped and fully, they know the condition of every one, so that, again, linked to their asset management system, they can prioritize where they're going to do their capital spending. This one is taken from the Port of Rotterdam. We've been working with the Port of Rotterdam now for about 12 years. They probably have one of the most extensive and investments in technology. This is a dashboard. They actually operate about 25 of these various dashboards. What you're really looking at is they're monitoring tide, wind, salinity levels, and any number of sensors in real time. The point being that certain vessels, based on their size, can only come in at certain times of the day because they have really sort of keel clearance issues. The line that you see on the charts on the left-hand side, that's real data. On the right is actually their prediction. So they know in real time, they can predict for the next several days what each one of those factors and variables are going to be. So again, fully instrumented sensors across the entire port to capture and analyze all that information. This is, I didn't have one for a crane, but this is for a wind farm. You get the concept. You can actually monitor the performance of every single one of your wind turbines. You can see on the lower part, every one is giving its current status. So we actually have 3 that are not performing. We know what the status of every wind turbine should be, how much energy it should be generating in real time. When we see 3 that are not, we actually can go to that particular wind turbine. We can actually analyze what the issue is. We can determine what part is needed. And oh, by the way, where is the closest technician that could repair that part? And what other turbines also have that same part. So again, this is the type of thing that we're beginning to do with digital twins. The end goal, I think, for ports is that we want to bring all that information together in real time so that how can we better manage the real-time performance of our port. And this is one of our partners in Spain. They actually bring a lot of information together, not only the location of every vessel, but all of the action of the cranes, and bringing all that together, so real-time dispatch of not only the tugs, but the mooring crews, as well as how do I monitor emissions in real time? All of that information brought together, including, I can tell you, the every crane, what it's doing, how many moves it's had in any particular time period. So again, all this information so that we can better monitor our ports, better manage our ports in real time. And this is really the end goal. This is what we're trying to do. How do we become more efficient, more effective, increase our productivity and our throughput at our ports? As the former port director at LA said, we're not making money until we're moving boxes across and that's what it's really all about. So there's any number of whatever your performance metrics are at your port. They can be monitored. You can analyze those, and ultimately, how do I continuously improve the performance at my port? And that's really what these are all about. This one from Vancouver, and again, based on really optimizing their asset. Well, I encourage you to take a look at this video when you get the opportunity. This is another port, Fremantle in Australia, and they do a nice little video highlighting the way that they're using their digital twin. So the idea with a digital twin, and again, I want to emphasize, they don't need to be three-dimensional. Two-dimensional is you can do quite a bit with a 2D digital twin as well. The real goal is how do we not only visualize and analyze, but really how do we get to the point where we can predict and optimize? And that's really the reason that you want to do a digital twin. My two last points. As a caution, I'm aware of an airport that has spent about $10 million building their digital twin, and they do not have a single use case for that digital twin at the moment. That's a problem. That's where they did not sit down with the business and the IT and really understand why they were doing it. Again, we do think that there's really strong value, and you're very fortunate here in Corpus Christi. Your folks are actually building what we consider really one of the best examples of a digital twin, really among U.S. ports. So kudos to Corpus Christi. With that, I think that's, and again, I would encourage you to take a look at a couple of those videos. So with that, thank you very much.
Hi, Leslie from Port of Corpus Christi. Terry has had the opportunity to hear me talk about our digital twin. And one of the things that we mentioned when we were in San Diego together was the fact that, and he highlighted this, you have to start with one bite of the elephant. The bite that we are taking at the Port of Corpus Christi started in port security. So we started by looking at, okay, we can digitize a lot of the port space. We have all those photographs. We've got all that built environment that we can add into our digital twin through GIS. We started with our mobile units in the port security space and the vessels. And then we're just going to go from there and start there. But your point about start somewhere and start small, that this is $1 million. It's not 10 million. And it's going to be live by June.
All right, we'll transition to our last panel. Russell, if you want to come on up. And then the motivation behind the next one is, we've already talked quite a bit about the maritime ports, and we wanted to have a discussion at the end to look at some of the different environments in the supply chain. So we're going to have a number of perspectives across different modes, and it'll be moderated by Russell Laughlin from Alliance, Texas.
All right, so we get to wrap up the afternoon. Everybody's hangry. They're going, where's my food? I don't want to listen to this anymore. So we're going to move pretty quickly here. As we're sitting here talking about ports, the anchor ports, the seaports, the amount of activity in terms of impact to the state, it's extraordinary. As we think about goods movements to hubs that go inside the state, they're extraordinary as well. And so I can think of about 2 inland ports, San Antonio, Alliance, that do huge volumes. The crossings at El Paso and the 2 bridges, massive volumes. probably 1 million trucks a year or CMVs. Laredo is growing up to, I don't know, maybe 600,000 train cars a year and probably 2 times the amount of trucks that you're experiencing in El Paso. The point being, there's a lot of goods movement that's going across. And how do we start to gather the data, interoperate it, and benefit our commercial property owners out there and our businesses in terms of their business enterprise? If we think at the end of the year we'll have a national multimodal freight corridor designated, what does that mean? How are we going to participate? Right now it's seaports, so inland ports. So with that, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself, tell me about your business a little bit, and then we'll jump right into a couple of questions. So Kara, we'll start with you.
Good. Good afternoon, everybody, or almost afternoon. Kara Hill, Director of Strategic Projects with Port San Antonio. We are redeveloping the old Kelly Air Force Base, which is about 1,900 acres. We are designated as an inland port. But one thing that happened in our trajectory that kind of changed our business model a little bit was in the BRAC of 2005, the 16th Air Force was bedded down at Lackland Air Force Base, which we share a fence line with, and also a joint use military civilian airfield. And the 16th Air Force, for those of you not familiar, is really the headquarters for Air Force Cyber. So it's both offense and defense, but also a number of signal intelligence and other related intelligence operations. And so we have this great inland port infrastructure, as well as some of the legacy assets from Kelly that includes a lot of maintenance, repair, and overhaul of aerospace and aircraft, both DoD and private. And as we started to see more contractors come through the 16th Air Force as well, and folks from the DC area come to do more cyber work, we really saw a lot of opportunities for integrating the legacy industries in logistics and manufacturing and aerospace with the cyber technologies that were occurring and coming out of the Air Force. So about 6 or 7 years ago, we transformed more to a tech port kind of model, and really now are focused on integrating the next generation of technologies into legacy industries. So that's a little bit about us. Currently, we have over 80 employers at our campus, with over 18,000 jobs created since the closure of the base, in all aspects from defense, cybersecurity, applied manufacturing, robotics, and a lot of associated applied technologies.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Price from Wabi, which is a autonomous truck developer, excuse me. And so we're operating here in the state of Texas on a couple of the different major highways. At Wabi, I'm the director of commercial programs and strategy. So I really help understand what are the right use cases, where should we be deploying, not only today, but 5 years from now. So that's one of the major reasons I'm excited to be here is, how can we best work with ports, both inland and maritime ports, to deploy autonomous technology? And I'm really appreciative of the state of Texas for giving the environment, or providing this environment in which we do operate and really develop this cutting edge technology. Really, the other thing, as I was listening this morning to the presentation, is data drives my company in everything we do. And so if you think about the autonomous vehicle on the road, it's, that's the hard part, getting the truck to safely drive itself on the highway, but also the ecosystem around the truck has to be, locked in. I mean, all the different data integrations and the seamless transfer of cargo, will enable the seamless transfer of cargo between whether it's the port and the truck and the warehouse, et cetera. So thinking about one level above that is the remote assistance and the different customer integrations we need to have. So, and then thinking one level above that is the data that is training our truck to even drive on these roads. So, and the software that needs to go on the vehicle and the data that needs to come out of this vehicle. So, really exciting discussion today, and excited to take part. And I have a little bit of a personal side story about how ports are really interesting to me. I started my career in the U.S. Coast Guard, so on ships coming in and out of our nation's ports, and doing some work there, and really exciting. And that's what brought me into logistics when I got out, is just the the challenges to be solved here. So, and then went to Flexport, which is a freight forwarder, also working with our ports, and then Aurora, and now at Wabi. So excited to be here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Natalie Littlefield. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Business Development with the Boardplex Alliance. We are a regional nonprofit economic development organization based in El Paso, Texas. We serve El Paso, Texas, as well as Las Cruces, New Mexico, and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. So we bring that today. I'm bring that economic development, workforce development perspective on the situation, and just kind of I think reiterating and wrapping up a lot of the earlier comments today about really the opportunity on the economic development side of things with COVID and the instability of the supply chains causing the nearshoring and the reshoring of these supply chains, and the signing of the USMCA agreement, trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, all creating a great perfect storm in a positive way of economic opportunity for the state, and certainly for our region, having a very strong manufacturing hub in Ciudad Juarez. We are the 5th largest manufacturing hub in North America. So we do, as Russell mentioned, have approximately 1 million trucks traveling through our ports of entry from Mexico into the United States. And so it's an incredibly important area, and those ports are incredibly important to the economy. And as we are seeing more of these supply chains and these companies show an interest in our area, that it's a wonderful opportunity. But you also see we anticipate growing number of trucks on the road, tons of trucks on the road, and that the constriction, when you see that traffic congestion, that restriction on the flow of traffic is directly correlated to the restriction in the flow of commerce. And so we have to make sure that we find ways, creative ways of making sure that flow of traffic is as smooth as possible, so that we continue to see the flow of commerce as we want to promote the economy. It also increases, as you heard earlier, time and again, that congestion of traffic is causing the air pollution. It's a very big problem. We want to see our economy grow, but as there are more companies moving to the area and more traffic, that problem is going to continue to grow. It's bad now, and it's going to continue to get worse. And we also have a security issue. Obviously, we're on an international border. We don't have enough border patrol agents and things, and we need technology solutions at our ports to make sure that we are moving as efficiently with maybe automated systems, various technologies to make up for the fact that we don't have enough border patrol agents. It is a security issue. Of course, you've also heard about the lack of truck drivers, and so as everywhere, we need those automated solutions to make up for that. But we also need to do things in a responsible way, and coordinating with Texas Workforce Commission and the Department of Labor to make sure that we're being transparent in the new jobs that we're creating, the transition of old jobs as we sunset old technologies, and just working hand in hand so that we are well prepared to make sure that our workers are not thrown under the bus, so to speak. We are preparing for a change in technology and adoption of new technology as we need it, but we are also taking care of our workers by being very methodical in identifying new occupations, new skill sets, and then working with our universities and with our workforce boards to make sure that we have the systems in place to take care of the workers at the same time.
I think maybe Roger. Roger, you there?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
hear us?
Yes,
Introduce
I
yourself.
Can you hear me okay? I'm an independent logistics consultant to short line railroads, clean energy companies, traditional energy companies, and aggregate companies. The purpose for my part of this presentation today is going to lean toward the destination or end users and the growth potential that probably will come from focusing on those folks.
I'm going to throw a disclaimer out immediately. I'm going to mention Class 1 railroads by name, but I have to say I have no current affiliation with any of them. And I'm mentioning them strictly because they are the key source for the rail connections along the Gulf Coast. The objective for my presentation today would be to simplify and streamline potential rail freight end users' access and ability to utilize railroad shipping. There are 6 significant challenges that a new rail user has to face. The first thing they come to is they have to identify a receiving port for whatever commodity they want to ship inland. Then they have to identify a serving railroad or railroads that serve that port. The third step is they have to select a destination for unloading at an inland facility. The fourth thing they have to do is work with a railroad or railroads to establish a route and a rate for a carload or carloads of any commodity. The fifth thing they have to do is select a transload or arrange unloading at destination. The sixth thing they have to do is hire or perform last mile trucking on their own. Those 6 events are complicated for people who aren't used to working in that environment. There are major companies that have entire departments that are set aside for this. There are some smaller operators that are used to it. There may be have a legacy relationship with rail operations and they're comfortable with it. And so they're used to it, and that's who we're generally working with. But anyone who wants to enter the business they have to go through one of the Class 1 railroads that serve one of the ports on the Gulf Coast. And those railroads would be the Union Pacific, BNSF, or Kansas City Southern. Those 3 railroads internally will help you a lot with step 4. They have online access where you can fill forms out and get rate quotes, and they'll support the route. They'll even give you transit times and turnaround times on cars, all of which they're very good at, but they don't cover the rest of it. And that gets pretty daunting for anyone who's trying to engage in using rail as an alternative to trucks. My idea is to set up basically an automated system that functions from the origin of the carload or the port actually, and it would capture the steps in one organized form or contact. So as an example, being a customer who wanted to order carloads of fertilizer to a rural location somewhere in the state of Texas could call the Port of Corpus Christi, using them as an example, and that they would have access to either conversationally to be directed on where to start, or they'd have a field they could input their information to, and then the information that's required to make the freight move would be provided quickly and basically automatically to them. So they'd have a rate and a route and a time for the arrival of their product. The BNSF, for example, currently lists on their website only 3 certified sites in Texas for transloading. Now, intermodal and automotive are a little different because those systems have been in place for a while. But the Union Pacific and Kansas City Southern is a case-by-case search. So it makes it difficult for someone who doesn't even understand the concept of using rail.
Roger, I'm going to interrupt you here.
Sure.
I can tell you've been in the consulting business for 50 years. You're doing a great job there. Let's let me ask a couple of questions here and move us on to the subject of infrastructure. Roger was kind of going there. So each of you, we have a border crossing, we have an inland port with 3 modes of modality, and we have a long haul, and we have a rail port. So infrastructure around each of these, what's out there today that works? What do we need in terms of data collection, data interoperability to start to affect the efficiency of the supply chain as we move goods away from our seaports and border crossings? So why don't I start with you, Andrew, since you're long haul, and then we'll come back to fixed locations.
Well, I think for our technology, this is one of the biggest questions is what kind of infrastructure is required. So you'll see us and many developers looking to a terminal or transfer hub model. And really what this is connecting those local drayage operations to the long haul truckers on the highway and trucking companies. And so it's more than just a transfer point. As you are aware at Alliance, it requires a significant amount of a data connection just in terms of pure internet bandwidth to offload all of the training data right now off of the truck, gigabytes every mission or every load we're doing, and also to get data on the truck. So not only at the site, but the cellular network as well to get remote assistance operators able to handle certain situations and assist the truck on the road, and then software deployments as well for the truck. So that's at the top level there. And this is some of this IT requirements are actually harder to come by. I mean, we're talking about 100 gig kind of connections to a site that's right off the highway. And so it can actually be quite hard to and quite expensive to get that kind of IT infrastructure to that kind of site versus maybe like an Amazon warehouse or a logistics park that already is connected there. So, the sites we're talking about are in locations similar to truck stops today, ideally.
So just to follow up on that real quick. So as you're transporting your long haul, say greater than 250 miles, how important is it to have infrastructure along your route for you to be communicating with, receiving information, redirecting, et cetera? And where does that exist?
Well, right now there's a couple different use cases for this type of infrastructure. One is it's a little bit less about the data. Right now, the truck can go long distances without stopping periodically every 250 miles or such. But when you think about what could go wrong, what kind of safe harbors do we need? That's the kind of discussion where, okay, we do need to start thinking about safe locations for this truck to launch and land from in the event it's needed, and a road closure, traffic jam, adverse weather, et cetera. And so those locations would have to be definitely connected via data.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Very good. Carrie, why don't we shift to you then? So you mentioned cybersecurity as one of your TechPort San Antonio initiatives. Back up for a second. 1,900-acre inland port. You do a lot of business there in terms of normal logistics, warehousing, distribution. So tie the cybersecurity piece into the collection of data, utilization of data, and communication of data between various users.
Sure. So I think regardless of what modality you're using, when you start to integrate AI and automation and electrification, it just opens up your aperture for cyber risk, right? And so it's really important to integrate cybersecurity controls throughout the entire supply chain. And some of that can be really as simple as basic cybersecurity hygiene and training. I think as we've seen, a lot of the data breaches that ultimately occur happen through a second or third or maybe even fourth tier supplier. So ensuring that small businesses all throughout the manufacturing and logistics supply chain have those basic things in mind. But then also, I think that's why we're seeing onshoring and reshoring so critical. Those really critical components, those chips, all the hardware that goes in to going between the modalities. We really need to make sure that that's secure and safe. And also integrating cybersecurity into various industrial controls. We have a group on our campus. They are a national consortium led by the University of Texas at San Antonio. It's called CyMani. So they are a DOE funded program. They work with a number of the national labs, including Sandia, Oak Ridge, and the Idaho National Labs, as well as UC Davis, Purdue, and GE and Lockheed. I mean, it's a very wide consortium that's really working on integrating the cybersecurity components into industrial controls throughout the supply chain. They've recently been awarded a Department of Commerce grant for the Tech Hubs National Initiative. It's a planning grant. Really, I think looking at something that Texas does well is integrating all of these technologies together. There are other groups that just focus on logistics or just cyber or just industrial controls, but really that full integration is something that Texas does really well nationally. So that's how I would say it all integrates.
Quick follow-up on that. So when you're talking about the integration of data and systems, is that done via local networks, private networks, or in-ground fiber? What is the best way for to prevent cybersecurity, hacks on transportation system? What's the best way to communicate?
Well, that's a interesting and complicated question. I think all of the above. I mean, you really need to be thinking through, soup to nuts, where could foreign actors integrate? So a lot of folks on our campus have that intelligence mindset of, okay, what could potentially happen and really trying to fill all of the gaps. So I don't know if that's specific enough, but that's kind of where we are.
That was a really complicated question. I apologize for it, but it's one that we ask every day. How should we best communicate among rolling stock, among fixed operations, and various enterprises that are providing data for us to move? And we haven't figured it out yet. So you were closer to Natalie, I'm going to ask you real quick. So just put it in, let's put it in the context of money for a second. So 1 million trucks a year coming across that border or trains, as that in the case may be, and you could save 30% of throughput through that. You capitalize that at 5%, you're talking about $500 billion of economic value to the state. What do we need to do at El Paso and Ysleta Bridge and others in terms of facilitating quicker border crossings? So customs involved, bridge technology, et cetera. What do you need to do in infrastructure?
Well, I think I'm drawing from a lot of the comments and things that I heard earlier, because I think it's about you have to leverage AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, much like the private sector is already doing. A lot of the trucking companies utilize these predictive analytics platforms to track their trucks and as they're on the road, and make sure that if they foresee a disruption, that they are able to mitigate that disruption by maybe looking for alternative routes and variety of things. And that's the sort of technology that could possibly be utilized at the ports without actually building new lanes and doing that sort of thing, but using some sort of digital technology, something like predictive analytics, where you're actually looking at the trucks and looking at the weather and looking at the cars and volume that day and seeing if there's something that could be done, especially when you're talking about a shortage of border patrol agents and that sort of thing. I think really it's not just a matter of pure efficiency. It's a matter of, like, you really just have to you really need to replace the lack of human capital with some of this technology to supplement that. So that's one possible way. I think also a continuity of maybe technology, things like Santa Teresa, similar. They got a similar DOT planning grant, and they're looking at doing it's really just a technology hub as well, integrating digital technology as well as automated, putting in infrastructure for automated trucks and vehicles and hydrogen, and doing these things to make sure that it's actually an extension of the Los Angeles trade port. And so looking thinking about it, that and maybe working in continuity, maybe a continuous transportation system could also facilitate greater newer technology, not just digital, but if we're replacing people and we're kind of addressing some of these things through automation or automated trucks or digital technology, that there's it's not just a port here and a port there, but a system across the United States and through Texas. Obviously, we want if there's that infrastructure, that continuous infrastructure through Texas, through I-10 down to the ports, then you encourage this traffic through our ports. I think that's great, and it's better for our economy to do that. So you leverage the technology, you complete the system across the United States, and therefore you are encouraging more trade into this and more activity into the state.
Absolutely. Very good. Okay, Roger. So we're going to come back to you now. As we're looking at diversification of supply routes, nearshoring, onshoring, much of the new manufacturing that we see coming into this hemisphere is going into Mexico. And that means BN, that means UP, Kansas City Southern are looking for routes reversing back down to Monterey, to Mexico City through either Presidio or Eagle Pass, in addition to all the trade that's already coming through Laredo. So for you, out in West Texas, a rail port where you are beginning to take advantage of an old line, orient back across through Presidio, what sort of technology cross-border coming to your rail port helps your rail port move those commodities out quicker to West Texas?
Well, it kind of takes me back to my original statement, is it needs to be simplified. The connectivity between any customer in Mexico and any producer or supplier in the U.S. needs to be standardized. That would be the biggest gain. And back to the origins side of it, we would need to actually identify locations, actual track space and services that are available to facilitate the movement of goods back across the border or receive them from Mexico. There are a lot of consultants like me and logistics companies that are we're all out there kind of selling the same space. And as hard as I've tried to find a clearinghouse, so to speak, that actually denotes track space and services at specific locations, it simply doesn't exist.
Very good. Okay, so let's pivot now around to technology in the future that we're envisioning today. How's it going to help us be safer in our transport of goods, our sorting of goods, our receiving goods, and the transport across our modes of transportation across Texas? How's it going to help us be safer and more efficient? So Karen, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I think one thing that we see a lot of promise in is in advanced air mobility, both in cross-border trucking. I think there's some interesting things that you could do there in terms of automated inspections, but also in terms of just adding another level of on-demand options for the entire system, and also in disaster relief situations. I think my previous world, I worked in utilities, and we used drones and that sort of thing for inspections of where you can't get a physical person there, or it's unsafe to do so. So I think that there's some really great opportunities that we have in that world. I think one thing that's important for us to remember is other states are investing in infrastructure related to vertiports and other things to help the private investments get spurred on in AAM and UAM. So I think there's an opportunity for the state to kick in some funds to help move that along. I think the private funds would be thereafter, but I think that's an opportunity for us.
Natalie, why don't you follow up with us and talk a little bit, maybe weave your workforce development piece into this?
Sure. I think technology around predicting, whether there's going to be an accident or what to do in the case of an accident from the economic development perspective, it's important. Well, first of all, it's important to secure, make sure that our roads are safe and secure. But when there is an accident, it does stop the flow of commerce again, flow of traffic, flow of commerce. And so integrating technology as to what the plan B is in the case of, in the event of an accident is, I think, would be very beneficial. And obviously cybersecurity and any kind of, as we talk about more about digital technology, cybersecurity has to go hand in hand, and often at the time of development, it has to go at the very beginning of that conversation. So I think on the workforce side, cybersecurity is, it's just going to be a part of everything. I think it's going to grow. I think maybe even specializations around certain types of technology, whether we're talking about digital twin or we're talking about software development, various things. It could be an issue to maybe little niches of cybersecurity as well. I think when we're talking about automated trucks, if we're talking about EVs, all of these things, it's a great opportunity because these are new sectors. As was mentioned earlier, I wanted to emphasize, it was a great point. These are new markets. While it's going to require a lot of investment, it's creating new markets and creating new jobs, new types of jobs, better quality, higher skilled jobs. And so there needs to be, again, I think, communication coordination with our workforce boards, TWC, DOL, as to what these new jobs are as they are created. I think some of this technology is a little bit fuzzy and maybe in pilot stages and or early stages. And so as the market demand grows and the industries grow, there'll be new job opportunities and new skill sets needed. So I think it just really has to be thought of as the investment, as we see, like we're identifying the challenges, we're developing, new plans for building out infrastructure and new technologies that are integrated. I think really it's going to spur new markets. It's going to create new jobs. And so I think there's a really strong case to, form an official maybe communications group of some kind that's in constant communication with one another, to have these conversations. We're doing this, we're creating this. It's going to require that so that the other agencies can respond accordingly.
Yeah, many of our high schools today have CTE programs. None of them have one that blends. I'm going to go into the aviation, so UAS side, into automated trucks, to digital platforms, to data management, et cetera. And we're trying to figure out how to get that together. So, Andrew, I'm going to ask you a real question. So as you're moving your autonomous trucks into a truck port or a terminal, you've already mentioned that you need to download data like the airlines are doing at the gates now in automated major airports. What else do you need for that drop and pick activity? I'm just talking about removing a container and getting a container on and getting to your next route. What sort of technology around that, real quick?
Yeah, so these terminals are, so important for the autonomous technology. And it's when I talk about a terminal, it's really anywhere you're going to launch. We call it launching or landing these autonomous vehicles. So it could be a terminal, transfer hub, a warehouse, a port someday. Those are the kind of places I'm speaking of. And the technology you need at these, other than the connectivity and data, just the operational solution. So think about, how are you going to fuel the truck? Where is the fuel? Where is the truck going to be charged someday? Where are those? Where is that infrastructure being placed? And do you also need to have it along the route? Things, I'm working with TxDOT very closely on the enhanced inspection protocol. So, and that requires certain certified inspectors to be at these locations, so we can hopefully bypass the commercial motor vehicle inspections on the road. The other part of that is, having a scale on site and weighing the truck, and not only for the purposes of, the enforcement side, but also for the purposes of safety and knowing as an autonomous developer, that load is loaded in a safe way. We don't have the driver on board, so we need to be extra sure. It's, we have the cargo weight, we know how it's loaded, and it's safe for the road. Then you start thinking about maintenance of these sensors and this the automated technology and the base vehicle, and where is that going to take place, and how is the truck going to get to those places, and who is going to offer those types of training programs. So at the top level, those are the few of the main most important features.
Very good, very
Yeah.
complicated. And so data at every point of the supply chain that we've talked about today is key in the interoperability and exchange of data. So I would say from my perspective, I really look forward to a multimodal freight, designated freight corridor, national freight corridor, so we can start to coordinate this activity. What I know from my personal perspective is, as I watch the containers, the tractors, the chassis being disparate all over the place, it's sort of like a baseball game, first pitch and it goes chaos, and they're scattered everywhere and we don't know where they are. We watch them. So having digital twins that can map a port in real time, an inland port or a seaport, where I know where every container is, number, what the manifest says, track it, know when it moved and when you're supposed to come get it, and how my cybersecurity broke down and says I can't get it now, is really, I think, what we're all looking forward to. So I think we have maybe time for a couple questions here. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Sure, you've got questions of these really smart private sector folks up here.
Yeah, great discussion. And you kind of hit on this a little bit, but just real quickly, if you could ask either the state of Texas or TxDOT for one thing, what would it be? What would help you? That's why I said quickly.
I think I already mentioned mine. I think it would be investing in infrastructure for UAM and AAM vertiports.
Ooh, tough one. I think our partnership with the state of Texas is pretty strong already on automated vehicles, and so we'd like to see that to continue. And we're making some great progress here, and not only my company but others in the state. And I think it's a model. It's really a model for other states to follow. So, easy answer, but please keep leading the way here. Thank you.
We've got a rookie there. He didn't know when you opened the door wide open.
I would say any technology or infrastructure that would decongest the ports absolutely causes so many problems. Like I said, constricts the flow of commerce, creates really bad air quality. All of that leads to our border patrol agents quitting or not wanting, or people just not wanting to be there. So it causes a human resources problem. So any technology or infrastructure that could decongest the ports is very, very critical.
Roger, you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. Tech support for mapping existing infrastructure and financial support to build a system that would simplify people's access.
Very good. Darren, I'll pile on top of that one and say, at $500 billion of economic activity in our port systems today, which is largely leading to $30 billion surplus in our state biennial fund, keep spending the money in transportation, seaport infrastructure, automation, technology. Don't care about anything else. Just take care of those. All right. There's got to be another question for one of us up here. Shirley?
I wanted to add something real quick on the workforce component. I know that that's been talked about quite a bit today, and I just wanted to share something that we're doing that we have found to be really working. So we did something kind of crazy, and we built a 13,000-foot innovation center for all of the technologies, to kind of a technology showcase and a museum and a concert venue that is outfitted for esports. And so we actually host esports competitions from around the world, and as well as host our local university components as well. And you wonder, like, what in the world are you guys doing esports for? But really the user interaction and the interface, the strategy, the communication that you have to have really does correlate to the virtual world that you see in automated systems. And so we've actually seen a lot of success. We have one company on our campus called Plus One Robotics. They do AI integrated warehouse robotics, and have over 1 billion picks now, I guess, in their warehousing. And they really focus on attracting and recruiting gamers because they say they are their very best roboticists, not only in operating, but in understanding the coordination that needs to happen. So just throwing that out there is something kind of different to think about.
Esports, you and Jerry Jones, right? Okay, so we haven't talked about, maybe for another time, it goes to warehouse automation. You're talking about robotic picks, yard management as it interfaces with the local supply chain piece of it. Spending a lot of time on that. I know all of y'all are at different places, but it really doesn't get fully integrated until you push it down into the warehouse and or the manufacturing floor. So we just touched the outside of it. Okay, I think that's it. Very good.
All right, the plan now is we're going to go around and ask the task force members for rapid fire, any observations, key takeaways, or questions that you want us to take home to think about as we plan the next couple of meetings. So after we've gone around and done, let's say 1 minute at max for each task force member, we're going to ask our co-chairs to help close us out, and then we'll give you some directions for lunch. Shelley, we'll start with you. Then we'll come to James, and then we'll end with Darren and Amit.
I'll just use this. And I don't know that I'm going to make the 1 minute mark, but I'll try. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to the task force for putting this on. I've learned so much. Ports were not in my bailiwick, and so this was really interesting. Intellectually, I'm still back on the first panel. I loved hearing from the port operators, and perhaps that's because I come from a transportation operations background, so it was fascinating. And I wrote down 3 observations. One was the real importance of staying focused on the fundamentals of what makes a port, like dredging, basics of port infrastructure. If you don't have that, you actually don't have a port. In our world, it was maintenance of roadways and bridges, right? And it strikes me that those things are underappreciated and underfunded. My second observation was the sheer volumes that you all are talking about. It's unbelievable. Someone who doesn't come from a port background, it's just staggering to hear about the volumes. The growth, what you were talking about at the Port of Houston, just staggering. So much so that I can't get the words out of my head. You can't build your way out of congestion, right? And so that's what it sounds like to me here too. The third observation was the mismatch in the time it takes to build the infrastructure that you need with the permitting process, the process of the processes, and then also the speed of the technology that overlays on top of it. So when I look at those 3 things, it's kind of like deja vu all over again, right? We said those things 20, 30 years ago about the highway infrastructure. So then that led me to think, well, then, so what? So what about that? And I wrote down 3 things about that. One is the need for nonstop lobbying for infrastructure investment. We finally got some infrastructure money. It's still not enough, but it's been nonstop lobbying for infrastructure investment. The other one is the technology needed to eke every possible operational advantage out of the system. And that's what we've heard so much conversation about here today. You all have, it strikes me as much more complex environment than we had in the highway field when we were doing this years ago. And the technology is so much more robust. So it sounds very complicated, exciting, and I wish you well. We were able to look at things like HOV lanes and trying to convince people to ride share and do those sorts of things. You don't get to say, don't buy that thing on Amazon. Why don't you not get that car? Or can we stop having wars that require us to ship military equipment all over the world? We don't get to say that here. So we've got to find ways to deal with it. And that was my third observation, is that it strikes me that because the problems and the growth are so big, that the questions have to be different. I'm really curious about other options. I wish we could have heard more about container on barge and some of the freight things we were just hearing about. It strikes me that there have to be different questions in order to get to some different kinds of answers. At the end of the day, we're here for TxDOT. And so then I had to go back to, well, so what does government get to do in all of this? And once again, I have three things. One is that government gets to be a convener. So as we look at what are the big questions that have to shift the whole conversation, government can be a convener. And that's a really good role for government. When we were working in ITS, way back when, we were working in the world of integration, data integration. And we just heard that on this last panel. And we were working in the world of standards and architecture. And I wonder what the corollary is here. And maybe that's solved. Maybe there's enough of a private sector money motivation that it will solve itself, or maybe it's already being solved. But it strikes me that in order to get the level of integration and efficiency, that there's going to need to be some kind of standards architecture, something in the background. And the last role for government is the chief storyteller. And so the story I heard today about the ports, I didn't know it to the level that you all explained it. And I think being able to tell a simple, concise, compelling story will be very important in an age when everything is media. And how do we get that story told in a way that's super compelling? Because you're going to have a good story to be able to break through all the clutter. Thank you for sharing all this with us today. It has been most enlightening.
So I'll try not to focus on the height of the new bridge, but and the
How expensive was that bridge?
just yeah, and interesting. My former chief engineer said no, it was for the barges. So anyway, I think in the last panel I may have heard support for a dedicated truck corridor. So some of us will harken back 19 years or so ago to the Trans-Texas corridor, but I won't focus on that either. I think there's many different operators, I think, or owners. So you have the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, you have the ship channels, you have the ports, then you have the land side, you got rail, you got highways and all that. So just to echo what Shelley said is, kudos to the group. And I'm sure the Port Authority Advisory Committee does this routinely, right? Brings everybody together. But I think broadening the audience is helpful to get the story, get the message out that, look, we all need to work together because it does have a huge impact on the state's economy, right? And so very happy to see and knew, but I think I'd forgotten that, the legislature this last session allowed for state funds to be spent inside the gate. Other states along the Gulf Coast have been doing that for a while. Texas wasn't doing it, so happy to see that. Looking forward to seeing the impact that has, and it, hopefully will continue investing. I know one's a revolving fund, but I think one's more of a grant. So kudos for the team. It was interesting. So I'm hopeful that the conversation will continue and people will look for solutions and not just operate in their silo and try and fix their problem, but let other people impacted know that it does require coordination, collaboration.
Like Shelley, I was fairly unenlightened about ports today, so I learned quite a bit. One of the things that struck me is that I've been in a couple different environments where they threw away the current mode of transportation and changed things. Singapore comes to mind. Singapore has built a number of dedicated roads to get trucks away from the port. Then it feeds into their public infrastructure. So it sort of leads me to believe, how do we think outside the box? I mean, someone said we can't add 2 more lanes to I-45 to improve. It's not going to do it. And so what do we need to do differently? I think transportation corridors deserve some interest, but I think it'd be interesting to have a panel we could find some cities that come and talk about revolutionary ways they change their infrastructure to solve this problem, because with the growth you all are projecting, that you don't have space. There's just not enough roadway space to do what you need to do. So
I'm going to just echo one thing that Shelley said. And the only thing I wrote down was the most powerful thing TxDOT has is the power to convene. And I could almost imagine that there's 20 business to business conversations that are happening because of today. And just need to keep doing more of that. And I'll end there because I know we're short on time.
Four very quick things. First, Darren, so far at least, the task force has demonstrated its ability to travel outside of Austin and not be arrested or get into other types of.
So far,
I know the day is still young, but so far we've been on our best behavior, and maybe we could travel outside Austin sometime in the next 10 years again. Lots of conversation about workforce. Look on the walls around this particular building of pictures of this port and how workers loaded ships 30, 40, 50 years ago. So as you fight this notion that technology is anti-workforce, pull photos to show how technology has helped the ability of making it a hair easier on our workforce and still get good paying jobs at our ports. Third point, we got to tear down these silos. We got to do a better job of cost allocating the costs and the benefits. I don't think it has to be perfect. Sometimes leadership is just saying, you know what, we may not be the winners of this particular revenue, but we're going to use our revenue to solve a particular problem. Sometimes leadership, I call it the left pocket, right pocket, right pocket problem. I think Russell said it great. Look at the economics to the state of Texas, TxDOT, which is our responsibility. You need to be a leader. TxDOT may not be capturing all the revenue from their leadership, but the state of Texas is capturing all the revenue from that leadership. And sometimes a good leader takes that leadership and brings infrastructure revenue to the party. Remind us all about the importance of communication, the importance of partnership, and the economics, I think, has been demonstrated. The economics of ports is so strong. It's sort of an all hands on deck, sorry to use that analogy, needing to help provide resources. And finally, we need classic system thinking. I think it was James that said we got to think outside the box. We need this classic systems thinking at the border, shipments across El Paso that we heard, at our seaports, and at our inland ports. These are often the same logistics chain concerns, and there should be some consortia that focuses on all three, so we're not all going around the tree and learning individually. But we got to take links out of the supply chain. Whoever created the term supply chain needs to be given like $1 zillion, because supply chain is a very inefficient process because you have all these links in the supply chain. That was a low standard. But what our job is to take the links out of the supply chain to create synergies between these inefficient elements. I think you're talking about conveyor systems of cargo. I don't think you're talking about bringing twice as many trucks into the Port of Houston. I think you're going to put conveyors on conveyor systems. They're going to go to certain warehouses 8, 10, 15 miles away. The Port of Houston will say, well, gee, we can't pay for that. TxDOT's going to say, we can't pay for that. But it's the most cost-effective thing we possibly can do for safety and air quality and the productivity of our ports. And we need I think it was our last meeting, we talked about the same thing on border crossings and the conveyor systems to cross. We're looking at similar solutions in our inland ports. So real credit goes to I think Corpus Christi came and gave us a presentation 2 meetings ago. And she was back again at our last meeting and the invitation for today. The whole team should be given a lot of credit of laser focusing on this topic. And I think it really reinforces really the responsibility of the task force when it comes to helping TxDOT and in transportation.
Well, thank you. This was a very interesting, enlightening meeting. First of all, thanks to the Port of Corpus Christi and TxDOT for organizing this meeting, and it was very nice to be out of Austin for this particular meeting. And like I said, it was very enlightening in terms of the impact of port on supply chain, whether or not we like that term. Just back of the envelope calculation or back of the agenda in this case, the amount of tonnage works out to roughly 1 freight truck per second every single day from all the ports. But of course, some of this is alleviated through pipelines or rail or now Gear was talking about barges. So I think, but 1 freight truck equivalent of good per second is a massive undertaking, which we don't see it that way, but it's all around us. I also had a few observations. As John Pollock mentioned, one of the things that struck me the most was, especially in the terms of when we talk about technology and infusing technology to make things more efficient, most infrastructure investments they're very capital intensive and are investments for a long period of time. Technology is changing much faster than these investments. So we've got to think about the kind of infrastructure, that layer of infrastructure between our transportation, whether it be ports or surface transportation infrastructure and technology. So I'm talking about the technological infrastructure, which could be hardware, software, workforce, everything put together that is not just meeting 1 or 2 use cases that are beginning to become 2 and 20 use cases very quickly, but also how do we meet or keep ourselves resilient for the days to come. So I'm thinking of an operating system, but not from a software perspective. I'm thinking of the workforce, the hardware that you would need in each one of your agencies and entities, the software you would need, the kinds of digitization you'd have to do around your infrastructure to keep things clicking and going, and not only just clicking and going, but also adapting to new technologies that are going to come every year or every other year and so forth. The third thing is just a thought that efficiency and resiliency often go opposite directions. So as we become more and more efficient, we try more and more new technological tools. We also got to think about redundancy and resiliency. We become very susceptible to slight disruptions in this system. I'm reminded of one weird incident many years ago where a ship dropped an anchor on an undersea optical fiber cable and there was internet blackout for vast periods of time, stalling all commerce and everything, right? So again, how as we design and try new systems, we also ought to think about redundancy and resiliency. But again, it was a very enlightening meeting, and I hope the afternoon is just as exciting. And we all look forward to welcoming the task force members and friends again on June 11th in Austin. Darren?
Appreciate our port hosts. This was really great, the opportunity to come down here. So thank you, Corpus Christi, for doing this. And to all our port representatives that represented the entire Gulf Coast. I wish it could be in every one of them this week, but other matters, and we'll try to make that happen. And I'll come back to that. Task force members, and especially the final comments, I really thought those were all pertinent. And so I hope I don't repeat them, but have captured them in our recording, because I always have to go back and rewatch this event. Strategic Initiatives and Innovation Division team and the CTR team for bringing in panelists. The one thing I really like about these is how often we bring panelists that I don't know and needed to know. And so this continues on that vein. There are several people here today that I'd never met before that I now know I need to know who they are, and my team needs to know, and we need to follow up and reach out to them. So that's back to convening comments. That's a key part of it. And participants online as well. you don't know who you're reaching. So I know, at least I saw earlier, Aaron Kosian from the Lieutenant Governor's office was on. So you don't know who you're necessarily talking to, especially if in the expanded web universe. So you are getting information that's unique out to a larger audience than you might normally get to. And as I said before, thank you to all our panelists. You bring unique perspectives and really valuable information. To that, I want you to understand, I've been on these panels, especially these short ones, and you're like, well, I only said like 2 things. I mean, what are they going to get at it? Well, I will tell you, we learn. We learn, and each one of those statements is impactful. And yes, you can't say everything you want to talk about, but that doesn't mean we're not going to come back to you. It maybe not in the next month, it may be a year from now, but we come back, and it's leading to things that we're continuing to develop and grow. So your time is very important to us, and I really respect the effort it takes to wherever you travel to. I mean, I think Austin Central for several of you, it's not. So wherever you come from to get here, be here for a morning, I recognize and really appreciate that travel. We have a freight advisory committee, a border trade advisory committee, a port advisory committee. All of those talk about the movement of commerce and goods in the state, but they don't get to talk about the technology components of it. So that's why this was of value to us, to hear some of the technology components and make us go back, ruminate on those. And I even appreciate, thinking outside the box comments. Don't just think about the immediate obvious ones, but what else could be done. There was a short comment from Port of Houston about the freight shuttle. The freight shuttle was an idea from Texas A&M many, many years, almost a decade ago. It was when I first got to TxDOT, and we were having discussions about it from day one. But there are now, discussions about potential of moving freight, using a freight shuttle to as you said, to a further location. And it's also a discussion at the land ports as well. So these ideas take a long time to develop in some cases, but they're still there. I also was thinking how important, from my military days as a commander, to get out on the ground. Sometimes you got to see the battlefield from the battlefield, where your people are, and understand the terrain. And that was another reason why we wanted to get out. Yeah, we didn't get out and see the entirety of the port. We will get to later this afternoon, hopeful. But the goal is to try and get out more and to the point where these things are impacting the state and understand them better. So appreciate that. I learned the harbor bridge is critical to the larger ships traveling into this port. And it's also critical to safety, throughput, less ballast water draw, and it is worth every penny spent on it. I'm really impressed by the port tech that's being employed and what's coming. The flow system fascinates me. I heard about, I think it was at Transportation Research Board in January. I know it's focused on the industry right now, but I think there's going back to Roger's comments at the end, I think that could feed that. And so I think we're going to have further discussions with federal authorities on when could that be more available and how might that be expanded to move goods. I love the all of the above comment and the need to understand transition over time as it relates to our alternative energies, the partnerships that have to be involved. I love the virtual port slide on the digital twins and the idea of starting small and moving through all those. I mean, I can take that not only for ports, but we can apply that all kinds of digital twin concepts in the department. The whole supply chain information vision, which I related to flow, cyber integration. I didn't know that it was Techport San Antonio. That's a whole thing I got to jump into. Natalie, you had some example. I got to know where that place was. It sounded like you said LA, but I want to understand that better. Data is key. It's a big thing with me. Russell said multimodal freight or designated freight corridor. I would say maybe axes of advance, because I don't think corridor captures. That's another military term. I don't think it captures rail and air and all and pipeline and all if you just say corridor, because they don't always neatly match up to each other. So what does that mean and how do we visualize that? as we work on these ideas. And the workforce thing, it comes up repeatedly. I would encourage you all, there's a Texas Workforce Commission, there's Texas Education Commission, get their address and start feeding them what is the future workforce you keep talking about needing. They don't know what they don't know, just like we don't. And they need to understand what are the skills, the job titles that you envision 5 years from now, or in just 3 years. What is needed by the industry and what is needed by the port authorities that's not available now, that's not being produced by our educational institutions. Maybe it doesn't require a degree. Maybe it's a certification program. There's a lot of we don't know right now in government as we talk about workforce and technology and how it's changing all that. And everybody's afraid of AI as it relates to that too. Man, I had one more thought. Where did I write it? Shoot. Well, you'll have to wait till next time to hear that one. Well, I will throw in, I love the discussion of AI, ML, predictive, digital twin, and I would encourage you, especially on the land port side, if you haven't looked at Senate Bill 1308's report and how it related to connectivity and autonomy and how that can improve the movement of goods through the land ports. A lot of the connected and autonomous vehicle task force industry members contributed to that report. And I think that kind of does talk to, at least from their viewpoint, what can be done. Now it's a matter of coordinating between federal, state, and local entities on how you might make that happen. That was not the point I wanted to make, but I saw that one too. Okay, darn it. It was a good one too. All right. Again, appreciate y'all's time. I know we went a little over. Michael, you had a comment.
Just a scheduling question. James, I'm looking at my calendar. When is the tour of the Harbor Bridge construction? I don't. No today, no bridge inspection none today? No, okay.
We're going under, safely under.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So any administrative
I'll
comments?
check the clearance as we go under.
All right. To you, Andrea. Thank you all.
And that will close out the meeting. Just a few notes as we transition to lunch. We do have lunch that'll be provided in the room next door. And we wanted to save time for one big thank you to the Port of Corpus Christi. They provided lunch. They helped organize the meeting, provided the venue. So you guys have been a wonderful host, and thank you for that.